Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into the ultimate time machine and witness the entire story of our world. Imagine yourself floating in an endless, silent void. Before you hangs a vast cosmic tapestry, a shimmering cloud of gas and dust, glowing with the soft, ethereal light of distant stars. This is a stellar nursery, a place where worlds are born. But your eyes are drawn to one tiny speck of dust, unremarkable in every way, except for one thing. That speck, glinting with frozen water and specks of iron, is the beginning of everything you've ever known. It's the start of home. That mote of dust will be slammed together with trillions of others, forged in fire, battered by worlds and shrouded in steam. It will die and be reborn, a lonely blue marble in a sea of black. So how did such a violent, chaotic beginning lead to quiet forests and deep oceans? How did a dead rock give birth to life, to consciousness, to you? Tonight, we're going to watch it all unfold. We're going to compress 4.5 billion years into the next 3 hours and witness the entire story of our world from the very first moment. Frankly, if you were actually floating here without a spaceship, the radiation would cook you before you even had a chance to appreciate the view. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. That small click sends a big signal to the algorithm. That long-form, serious educational content still matters. And to me, it's an incredibly meaningful show of support. Thank you so much for helping keep this channel going strong. It always fascinates me to see where you're all tuning in from. Let me know in the comments where you are in the world and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are floating in that cosmic cloud, the solar nebula. It's quiet and cold, but it's not empty. This cloud is the ghost of a massive star that lived and died long before our story begins. In its death throes, that star forged heavy elements in its core and then scattered them across the galaxy in a supernova. Every speck of iron, carbon, and silicon you see around you was born in that stellar heart. The iron that will one day be in your blood is here, a cold and lonely fleck of dust. For now, everything is in a delicate balance. But gravity is patient. A nearby shockwave, perhaps from another dying star, passes through the cloud, and the balance is broken. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the cloud begins to collapse in on itself. Most of the material spirals toward the center, getting denser and hotter. You watch as a protostar begins to glow, a dull, angry red at first, then a fierce, brilliant yellow. Our sun has just been born. As a young star, it enters its T-Tauri phase, a sort of stellar temper tantrum, blasting out a ferocious solar wind that clears the surrounding space of most of the remaining gas and lighter dust. Only the heavier, stickier stuff remains, orbiting in a flat, spinning disk. This is the raw material for planets. Now your focus shifts to a region a comfortable distance from the new star. Here, in this protoplanetary disk, chaos reigns. It's not a gentle clumping, but a violent billiards game on a cosmic scale. Dust grains stick together to form pebbles. Pebbles collide to form rocks. Rocks smash together to form boulders. And boulders crash into each other to form planetesimals. Small, misshapen protoplanets miles across. For millions of years, you watch this gravitational demolition derby. Planetesimals collide, sometimes sticking together, sometimes shattering each other into rubble. One of these growing bodies is on a lucky streak. It's large enough that its gravity starts pulling in everything around it, a process called accretion. This is the infant Earth. It doesn't look like home. It's a terrifying, glowing sphere of molten rock, a magma ocean thousands of miles deep. The surface temperature is over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to vaporize lead. The landscape, if you could call it that, is a heaving, bubbling sea of lava under a blood-red sky. There is no water, no land, only fire and rock. The sound is a constant, deafening roar from the ceaseless bombardment of asteroids and comets, the leftovers of planetary formation. This violent era is appropriately named the Hadean Eon, after Hades, the Greek underworld. As you watch this hellish world, you notice something odd. The day-night cycle is incredibly fast. The molten planet is spinning furiously, completing a full rotation in just 6 hours. The dim young sun and the starry cosmos race across the sky. This rapid spin is a relic of the angular momentum from all those cosmic collisions. Something will have to slow it down. While the surface is a scene of utter chaos, a quiet and profound transformation is happening deep inside. The young Earth is so hot that it's almost entirely liquid. This allows the heavier elements to obey gravity's call. Droplets of molten iron and nickel, far denser than the surrounding rock, begin to sink toward the center of the planet. This process, known as planetary differentiation, forms the Earth's core. The lighter silicate materials are displaced, rising to the surface to eventually form the mantle and the crust. Scientists still debate the exact timing of this process, but within the first few tens of millions of years, our planet's basic internal structure is established. This separation isn't just geological housekeeping, it's the birth of Earth's engine, the power source that will one day drive volcanoes, shift continents, and generate a magnetic field that is essential for life. The stage is being set, but the greatest act of cosmic violence is yet to come. For millions of years, the Hadean Earth continues its violent dance of accretion, but it's no longer alone. You notice another world, a planetary sibling, tracing a similar path around the young sun. This is Theia, a rogue planet roughly the size of Mars. For eons, Earth and Theia have been locked in a complex gravitational waltz, their orbits stable but dangerously close. You watch as their dance becomes a slow, inexorable spiral. Over thousands of years, their paths draw nearer. The gravitational pull of the larger Earth tugs Theia from its stable orbit, and the final act begins. There is no sound in the vacuum of space, but you can almost feel the crescendo as Theia, glowing from its own internal heat, accelerates toward its appointment with destiny. The impact, when it comes, is an event of unimaginable scale. According to the leading scientific theory, the giant impact hypothesis, Theia doesn't strike head-on. Instead, it delivers a cataclysmic, glancing blow, striking the molten Earth at a shallow angle. The collision is so energetic, it defies earthly comparison. Both Theia and a huge portion of Earth's silicate mantle are instantly vaporized by the impact, creating a cloud of superheated rock gas that expands at incredible speed. Theia's dense iron core plunges through Earth's mantle to merge with our own, a final contribution to the planet's engine. The impact tilts the Earth on its axis, giving us the seasons we experience today, a permanent scar from this cosmic encounter. The scene that unfolds is both terrifying and beautiful. The colossal cloud of vaporized rock doesn't escape into space. Instead, Earth's gravity captures it, pulling it into a massive glowing ring of debris that encircles the wounded planet. For a brief moment in geological time, Earth looks like a fiery version of Saturn, surrounded by a luminous, swirling ring of molten rock and gas, with temperatures in the thousands of degrees. This is not a stable structure. The laws of gravity are relentless. Within this ring, particles begin to collide and stick together. You watch as, over the next few centuries, a mere instant in cosmic time, the ring begins to clump. A single dominant gravitational center emerges, a growing snowball of molten rock, sweeping its orbit clean of the remaining debris. A second molten sphere is born in the skies of Earth. This is the Moon. This violent birth story, once a fringe idea, is now the most widely accepted scientific explanation for the Moon's existence. The evidence is compelling. When the Apollo astronauts brought back lunar rock samples, scientists discovered their isotopic composition was remarkably similar to rocks from Earth's mantle, suggesting a common origin. Furthermore, the Moon has a disproportionately small iron core, which makes perfect sense if it was formed primarily from the iron-poor mantles of Earth and Theia, while Theia's core merged with our own. The new Moon is a spectacle to behold. It is not the pale, distant companion you know. It hangs in the sky, a monstrous glowing orb of magma, more than 15 times closer to Earth than it is today, perhaps only 15,000 miles away. It looms so large it would fill a huge portion of the sky, a celestial giant radiating an intense heat you could feel on the planet's surface. Its gravitational pull is immense. As it orbits the Earth, it raises colossal tides not of water, but of molten rock. A wave of magma hundreds of feet high perpetually circles the globe, a testament to the Moon's awesome power. This intimate gravitational embrace has a profound effect on the planet. This enormous magma tide, constantly being dragged around the planet by the Moon, acts as a powerful brake on Earth's rotation. You can see the planet's furious 6-hour day begin to lengthen. This process is called tidal friction. As the Earth's spin slows, that angular momentum has to go somewhere. It's transferred to the Moon, pushing it into a higher orbit. The Moon begins to drift away from the Earth, a process that continues even now at a rate of about 1.5 inches per year. The formation of the Moon was not just a singular, violent event. It was the beginning of a relationship that would stabilize our planet's wobble, slow our day to a manageable 24 hours, and create the tides that may have been crucial for the stirring of the first life. The most violent day in Earth's history has just given it a permanent partner for the long journey ahead. You watch as the Earth continues its slow, patient journey of cooling. The surface, once a uniform ocean of magma, is now beginning to form a fragile, black skin of basaltic rock. It's a chaotic landscape of cracks, fissures, and shield volcanoes that constantly ooze fresh lava, patching the cooling crust. But the most dramatic change is happening in the atmosphere. The young Earth is wrapped in a thick, crushing blanket of gases vented from its interior. Carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur compounds, and an immense quantity of water vapor, all held close by the planet's gravity. For millions of years, the surface has been too hot for liquid water to exist, trapping all of Earth's water in the form of superheated steam. Our planet is a planetary-scale pressure cooker. As you watch, the surface temperature finally drops below a critical threshold, the boiling point of water. High in the thick, soupy atmosphere, the first droplet of liquid water condenses. And then another. and another. What begins is not a gentle shower, but the greatest storm in our planet's history. It is a single, uninterrupted, planet-wide deluge that lasts for centuries, perhaps thousands of years. The sound is a deafening, continuous roar as torrents of water fall from the sky. The first drops to reach the surface meet a violent end. They strike the hot black rock and instantly vaporize with an explosive hiss, shooting back into the atmosphere as steam. For a long time, the ground is too hot for water to pool. The entire world is shrouded in a thick, perpetual mist, a sauna of cosmic proportions. But slowly, stubbornly, the rain continues to fall, and the crust continues to cool. The balance begins to shift. Water starts to survive on the surface, first for a few seconds, then for a few minutes. It begins to collect in the vast craters left over from the earlier bombardment, forming hot, steaming lakes. These puddles grow into lakes, the lakes grow into seas, and the seas merge to become the first global ocean. You are looking at a water world, but it's an alien one. The water isn't the clear blue you know. Thanks to huge amounts of dissolved iron, the oceans are a strange, unsettling olive green color. They are also hot, with temperatures perhaps reaching 185 degrees Fahrenheit, and acidic from the carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds dissolved within them. The water falling from the sky isn't the only source. The solar system is still a messy, dangerous place. This period, known as the Late Heavy Bombardment, sees a final flurry of massive impacts. You watch as icy comets and water-rich asteroids, leftovers from the outer solar system, streak through the atmosphere and slam into the young planet. Each one is a cosmic delivery, contributing its frozen payload to the growing oceans. This isn't just a theory, it's a story told by chemistry. Scientists have analyzed the isotopic signature of water, the specific ratio of heavy hydrogen to normal hydrogen, and found that the water in Earth's oceans is a close match for that found in certain types of asteroids. It's a chemical fingerprint, evidence that a significant portion of the water you drink today was delivered by celestial bombardment billions of years ago. The formation of the oceans has a profound, quieting effect on the planet. This vast body of water acts as a global thermostat, absorbing heat and stabilizing the climate. It also begins to dissolve the thick carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, thinning the oppressive blanket of gas. For the first time, the sky might be clearing. The planet is still a hostile place of barren volcanic islands and steaming green seas, but it has been transformed. It is no longer a world of fire, but a world of water. Planetary scientists still argue today about the true origin story of our oceans. Was it primarily the homegrown steam from volcanoes, or was it the imported water from space? The most likely answer is that both played a crucial role in giving our planet the lifeblood it would need for the next, most miraculous chapter of its story. Your journey now takes you beneath the waves of the hot, green Archean Ocean. As you descend, the dim sunlight from above fades to an eternal twilight, and then to a perfect, crushing blackness. The pressure here is immense, enough to flatten a modern submarine. You are miles deep, in a realm that will not see sunlight for billions of years. The seafloor is a landscape of volcanic rock, silent and seemingly dead. But then, you see a shimmer in the darkness. As you draw closer, you see a forest of jagged, chimney-like structures, some towering dozens of feet high. Plumes of what looks like black smoke are billowing from their tops, creating a ghostly, inverted waterfall in the deep. These are hydrothermal vents, or black smokers. They are fissures in the young planet's crust, connecting the cold ocean depths directly to the fiery mantle below. The smoke isn't smoke at all, but superheated water, rich with dissolved minerals and chemicals from the Earth's interior: sulfur, iron, manganese, carbon dioxide, and methane. This is where the planet's internal heat meets the cold of the abyss, and in this turbulent meeting place, a miracle of chemistry is about to unfold. You are floating at the edge of what can only be described as a natural chemical laboratory, working on the grandest experiment of all time, the origin of life. The steep gradients in temperature and chemistry around these vents create a perfect engine for synthesis. It's a place of relentless chemical activity, randomly combining simple molecules into more complex ones. For centuries, scientists puzzled over how the inanimate chemical building blocks of life could have formed. Then, in 1952, the famous Miller-Urey experiment provided a stunning clue. Scientists Stanley Miller and Harold Urey created a sealed apparatus containing a mix of simple gases thought to exist on the early Earth: methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, and passed a continuous electrical spark through them to simulate lightning. Within a week, the water in the flask had turned a murky brown, and analysis revealed it was teeming with amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. The experiment proved that the transition from simple geology to complex organic chemistry was not a leap of faith, but a natural, plausible step. Here, in the deep ocean, a similar process is happening. The intense energy from the vents is forging the first organic molecules, but amino acids are just the bricks. You need a blueprint. This is the central puzzle of abiogenesis. Which came first, the proteins that do the work of the cell, or the DNA that stores the instructions? The answer, many scientists now believe, is neither. The first spark of life was likely ignited by a simpler, more versatile molecule: RNA. You can think of RNA as a quirky, jack-of-all-trades molecule. Like DNA, it can store genetic information in its sequence of nucleotides. But unlike DNA, it can also fold itself into complex shapes and act as an enzyme to catalyze chemical reactions, much like a protein. This elegant solution is the RNA world hypothesis, a time when life was based entirely on RNA, which acted as both gene and enzyme. The next step is to create a boundary, to separate the fledgling life process from the chaotic ocean around it. You watch as another type of molecule being forged in this primordial soup. Lipids, long, fatty molecules, demonstrate a simple and beautiful property of physics. One end of a lipid is attracted to water, the other is repelled by it. When enough of them are in the water, they spontaneously arrange themselves into tiny, hollow spheres called vesicles, with their water-hating tails tucked safely on the inside. These are the first primitive cell membranes. Now, the final, crucial moment of chance. One of these lipid bubbles happens to form around a strand of RNA that has, through countless random combinations, developed the ability to make copies of itself. This is the first protocell. It is not truly alive, not yet, but it is a distinct entity. Inside its protective membrane, the self-replicating RNA molecule can work its magic in a stable, contained environment, a tiny chemical sanctuary. It's a structure capable of self-replication. This was not a singular event. For millions of years, this process of trial and error played out across countless hydrothermal vents and perhaps in sun-drenched tidal pools on the surface. trillions upon trillions of chemical combinations were tried and failed. But probability is a powerful force on a planetary scale over geologic time. In one of these countless microscopic laboratories, a combination of molecules was assembled that was not only stable, but was capable of sustaining itself, of replicating, and of evolving. At that moment, the Earth ceased to be just a dead rock. The first fully formed cell has appeared, and life on this planet has officially begun. This first successful cell is the patriarch and matriarch of everything to come. It is the single trunk of the great tree of life. Scientists have a name for the population of organisms that existed at this crucial branching point. LUCA, the last universal common ancestor. Pinpointing what LUCA was exactly is a subject of intense scholarly debate. It wasn't a single creature you could point to, but a community of primitive cells sharing and swapping genes in a communal soup. But from this common ancestral pool, all life that has ever existed on this planet, every bacterium, every fungus, every sequoia, and every human, will eventually descend. The planet is now officially alive. For the next billion years, an almost incomprehensibly long stretch of time, these are the only inhabitants of Earth. The world belongs to the prokaryotes. As you drift through the ancient seas, you see that these cells are models of simplicity. They are essentially microscopic bags of living chemistry. Their genetic material, a simple loop of DNA, just floats freely inside them. There is no nucleus, no mitochondria, no complex internal machinery. They are the studio apartments of the biological world, efficient, compact, and with everything in one room. They reproduce by simply dividing in two, making perfect copies of themselves, a process that is fast and effective. You also notice something fundamental about the way they live. They don't breathe. The atmosphere is still a noxious mix of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and methane, with virtually no free oxygen. These organisms are anaerobes, meaning they live and thrive in the absence of oxygen. To them, oxygen is a lethal poison, a corrosive gas that would tear their primitive cellular machinery apart. Their energy doesn't come from respiration, but from strange and wonderful chemical reactions. Some cells eat sulfur compounds bubbling up from volcanic vents. Others feast on iron dissolved in the water. They are masters of a chemistry that is now rare and confined to the forgotten corners of our world. Slowly, these individual cells begin to form communities, creating the first ecosystems. In the warm, shallow coastal waters, you see one of the most remarkable and enduring signs of this early life, stromatolites. They look like strange, lumpy, dome-shaped rocks arranged in vast fields that stretch to the horizon. But they are not rocks. They are living cities. These structures are built, layer by painstaking layer, by immense colonies of microbes, particularly photosynthetic bacteria. The top layer of cells captures the dim sunlight, while the layers below process the waste products, creating a self-sustaining microbial metropolis. As sediment washes over them, the bacteria simply grow a new layer on top, cementing the particles in place. Over thousands of years, this creates the layered, rock-like structures you see. These stromatolite fossils are among the oldest direct evidence of life on Earth, with some examples dating back 3.5 billion years. In a few places on the modern Earth, like Shark Bay in Australia, you can still see living stromatolites growing today, a direct window into the planet's deep past. While this slow, quiet revolution of life unfolds on the surface, a far more dynamic and powerful process is solidifying deep within the planet's core. The Earth's differentiation is now complete. At the very center is a solid inner core of pure iron and nickel, under unimaginable pressure that keeps it from melting despite being as hot as the surface of the sun. Surrounding this is a vast ocean of molten iron and nickel, the liquid outer core. Heated from below by the solid core and cooled from above by the mantle, this metallic liquid is in constant turbulent motion. Great swirling plumes of molten iron rise and fall, a process of convection on a planetary scale. Because the planet is spinning, this churning electrically conductive fluid acts as a massive electrical generator. This is the geodynamo, and it produces one of the most important and invisible features our planet possesses: a global magnetic field. You can't see it, but you can see its effect. An invisible shield, the magnetosphere, now envelops the Earth, extending tens of thousands of miles out into space. As the young sun bombards the solar system with the solar wind, a constant stream of charged particles, this shield deflects the deadly radiation around the planet. Without it, the solar wind would strip away our atmosphere, boil our oceans, and ensure that the fragile life clinging to the surface would be scoured from existence. This planetary force field isn't static. As you watch over the eons, you notice the magnetic poles, the north and south, begin to wander, and then, quite suddenly, they flip entirely. North becomes south, and south becomes north. This is a magnetic pole reversal, a chaotic process that happens on average every few 100,000 years. For the life on the surface, this is of little consequence. But it's a quirky reminder of the violent, churning engine deep beneath their feet. The quiet, microbial world above is only possible because of the fiery, dynamic heart of the planet below, a partnership of geology and biology that has just begun. For more than 1 billion years, life has been a quiet, microbial affair. The prokaryotes have mastered their world, thriving in the warm, oxygen-free oceans. But there's a problem, a quiet but looming crisis of energy. The chemical feasts found around hydrothermal vents and other geological hotspots are rich, but they are localized and finite. For life to truly conquer the planet, to expand beyond these oases, it needs a power source that is abundant, reliable, and available everywhere. It needs to tap into the single greatest source of energy in the solar system, the one that has been bathing the planet in light since its birth: the sun. Floating in the shallow sunlit waters of a microbial reef, you witness the solution. A new type of prokaryote is beginning to dominate. These are the cyanobacteria, often called blue-green algae, though they are true bacteria. They have evolved a revolutionary new skill, a piece of molecular magic that will remake the world. They have invented photosynthesis. Inside each tiny cell is a remarkable molecule called chlorophyll. It's a pigment that acts like a microscopic solar panel, perfectly shaped to capture the energy of a photon of light arriving from 93 million miles away. You watch the process unfold on a molecular level. The cyanobacterium uses the captured solar energy to perform a feat of alchemy. It splits a water molecule, an incredibly stable and difficult thing to do. It takes the hydrogen, combines it with carbon dioxide dissolved in the ocean, and creates a simple sugar, food. It's a self-contained, solar-powered sugar factory. For the first time, life is eating light. This invention gives the cyanobacteria an almost limitless source of energy, and they explode across the planet, becoming the dominant life form in the global oceans. But this elegant process has a byproduct. After the water molecule is split and its hydrogen is stolen, one atom is left over. It is a single, highly reactive atom of oxygen. For the cyanobacterium, this oxygen is just garbage, a waste product to be expelled from the cell. But for the anaerobic planet, it is a poison of unparalleled potency. A ticking time bomb has just been armed. For hundreds of millions of years, however, the bomb doesn't go off. The planet has a built-in safety mechanism. For eons, the oceans have been saturated with dissolved iron, washed into the sea from the primordial continents. This is what gave the water its murky, greenish hue. As the cyanobacteria pump out their oxygen waste, this free oxygen doesn't have a chance to build up in the water or the atmosphere. It immediately finds a partner to react with, all that dissolved iron. The oxygen latches onto the iron, and the ocean begins to rust. You witness a slow, silent, and continuous snowfall in the deep. Tiny particles of iron oxide, rust, precipitate out of the water and drift down to the seabed. This process happens on a global scale for nearly 1 billion years. Layer upon layer of iron-rich sediment is laid down, creating a geological scar that tells the story of this planetary transformation. These layers, compressed and cooked over the eons, will become the banded iron formations, the massive deposits that are the source of nearly all the iron ore we mine and use today. The steel in your car, the frame of your building, the nails in your house, all of it is a legacy of this first breath, this planetary-scale rusting event. Geologists still debate the exact pace of this process, but the evidence is undeniable, written in miles-thick bands of rock. But the iron in the oceans, vast as it is not infinite. You watch as, over an immense stretch of time, the great rusting slows down. The cyanobacteria, in their photosynthetic success, have finally used up all the readily available iron. The planet's chemical buffer is gone. Now, when the cyanobacteria release their oxygen waste, it has nowhere to go. It begins to saturate the oceans. For the first time, significant amounts of free oxygen, this dangerous corrosive gas, are about to escape the water and enter the atmosphere. The ticking has stopped. The bomb is about to detonate. The oxygen bomb detonates not with a flash and a bang, but with a slow, silent, and inexorable tide. As the gas seeps from the oceans into the atmosphere, you are witnessing the first, and arguably the greatest pollution event in this planet's history. To the trillions of anaerobic organisms that have owned the world for over 1 billion years, this is not the breath of life. It is an invisible fire, a corrosive plague that tears apart their delicate cellular structures. Free oxygen is a radical, aggressive molecule, desperate to react with and destroy organic matter. For these ancient microbes, it is the end of the world. A mass extinction of unimaginable scale sweeps the globe. The oceans, once teeming with diverse anaerobic life, become a graveyard. Entire branches of the tree of life are lopped off in a geological instant, their unique chemistries and evolutionary histories lost forever. You watch as this invisible wave of death spreads. The only survivors are those that find refuge in the dark, forgotten corners of the world where the poison cannot reach, deep in the foul-smelling mud of the sea floor, in geothermal hot springs, or buried far underground. Their descendants still live in these oxygen-free pockets today, relics of a lost world. But life is resilient. Among the microbial multitudes, some had already evolved a rudimentary defense against stray oxygen radicals, a kind of cellular antioxidant. In the face of this global crisis, these organisms now perform a stroke of evolutionary genius that will change the future of the planet. They don't just resist the poison, they harness it. They evolve a new and incredibly powerful metabolic pathway. Aerobic respiration. In essence, they learn to breathe. They turn the raging fire of oxygen into a controlled, clean-burning furnace inside their cells, using it to break down sugars and release a torrent of energy. The difference is staggering. Aerobic respiration can extract nearly 20 times more energy from a single sugar molecule than the most efficient anaerobic process. It's the difference between a candle and a nuclear reactor. The organisms that master this new trick are suddenly supercharged. They have an almost limitless supply of energy, allowing them to grow faster, reproduce more quickly, and evolve in ways that were previously impossible. The meek have inherited a new poisoned Earth, and they will become its masters. The planet itself is transformed by this new atmosphere. The sky changes color. The early atmosphere was thick with methane, a potent greenhouse gas that likely gave the sky a hazy orange-red tint, much like Saturn's moon Titan today. But oxygen reacts with methane, breaking it down and removing it from the air. As the methane haze clears and the atmosphere fills with oxygen and nitrogen, sunlight begins to scatter differently. The sky turns a brilliant, piercing blue for the first time. The land, which has been a barren expanse of grey and black volcanic rock, also begins to change. Just as the iron in the oceans rusted, now the exposed rock on the continents begins to rust. The oxygen attacks the iron-rich minerals on the surface, staining the land in vast swathes of ochre and red. The planet is literally rusting over, creating the great red beds that geologists find in the rock record from this period. But the removal of all that atmospheric methane has one final devastating consequence. Methane is an incredibly powerful greenhouse gas, far more so than carbon dioxide. By cleansing the atmosphere of it, life has inadvertently turned down the planet's thermostat. Radically, global temperatures plummet in a geological flash freeze. Ice sheets begin to form at the poles and creep toward the equator. This is the Huronian glaciation, a planet-wide deep freeze that may have been the very first Snowball Earth event, encasing the entire world in ice for millions of years. Life, in its greatest innovative leap, has plunged its own cradle into a seemingly endless winter. After the Great Freeze and the cleansing of the atmosphere, the world settles into a long, quiet period of stability. The planet is alive, oxygenated, and for the most part, peaceful. But from an evolutionary perspective, it's boring. For over 1 billion years, life seems to hit a plateau. This immense stretch of time, from roughly 1.8 billion to 800 million years ago, is often called the boring billion by paleontologists. The planet is still entirely ruled by single-celled organisms. There are the simple prokaryotes, and now the slightly more advanced bacteria that have mastered oxygen. But they are all still just microscopic loners. Evolution, it seems, has run out of ideas. The greatest revolution in the history of life is not going to come from a new invention, but from a chance encounter. An act of consumption that turns into a partnership, a corporate merger on a cellular scale. You are watching a larger predatory prokaryotic cell hunting in the water. It's an amoeba-like blob moving through the ocean in search of its next meal. It encounters a much smaller bacterium, one of the new oxygen-breathing types. The larger cell surrounds the smaller one, engulfing it in a process called phagocytosis. Usually, this is the end of the story. the smaller cell would be broken down by enzymes and digested. But this time, something different happens. The smaller cell isn't destroyed. It survives, intact, floating in the soupy interior of its would-be predator. A symbiotic bargain is struck. The larger host cell provides the smaller bacterium with a safe, stable home, protecting it from the dangers of the outside world and providing it with a steady supply of raw materials for food. In return, the little engulfed cell, this master of oxygen respiration, begins to pay rent. And the currency it pays in is pure energy. It takes the food provided by the host, uses oxygen to burn it with incredible efficiency, and churns out a massive surplus of energy-rich molecules called ATP. It becomes a tiny, hyper-efficient power plant living inside the host cell, providing it with far more energy than it could ever hope to produce on its own. This new composite being is the first eukaryotic cell. It is a monumental leap in complexity, a fundamental shift in the architecture of life. You can now clearly see the difference, a difference as vast as that between a tiny studio apartment and a sprawling mansion. The old prokaryote was the studio apartment, a single room where its DNA, its tools, and its waste all floated around together. This new eukaryote is a mansion. For the first time, it builds a dedicated room, a protective inner sanctum, to house its precious genetic information. This is the nucleus, the cell's command center. The DNA is no longer a simple loop, but is organized into complex chromosomes, allowing for much more information to be stored and managed. And of course, the mansion now has its own power stations, the descendants of that captured bacterium, which over millions of years of co-evolution have become streamlined and specialized for their single task of energy production. These are the mitochondria. Every animal, every fungus, every plant, every creature on Earth more complex than a bacterium is a eukaryote. And every single one of our cells, including the ones in your body right now, contains these tiny power plants, the ghosts of this ancient microscopic merger. Amazingly, life performed this incredible trick not once, but twice. Sometime later, one of these newly minted eukaryotes, already equipped with mitochondria, engulfed another type of cell, a photosynthetic cyanobacterium. The same deal was struck. The cyanobacterium found a safe home, and in return, it paid its rent in sugar, which it created from pure sunlight. This captured photosynthesizer became the first chloroplast. This single event gave rise to the entire kingdom of algae and plants. Every blade of grass, every giant redwood owes its existence to this second act of cellular symbiosis. This incredible story, known as the endosymbiosis theory, was championed for decades by the biologist Lynn Margulis, who faced immense skepticism. But the evidence is now overwhelming and written inside our own cells. If you look at the mitochondria and chloroplasts, you'll find that they have their own separate DNA. This DNA is not arranged in chromosomes like the DNA in our cell's nucleus. It's a simple, circular loop, just like the DNA of a free-living bacterium. Even more peculiar, these organelles reproduce independently. They divide and multiply inside our cells on their own schedule, a ghostly echo of their former freedom. It is the definitive proof that we are all chimeras, the result of an ancient and enduring alliance between bitter rivals. While the exact identity of the original host cell is still a topic of lively scientific debate, the legacy of this union is undeniable. Life has finally acquired the complexity and the energy budget it needs for its next great leap: teamwork. The new eukaryotic cell, with its powerful mitochondria and organized nucleus, is an evolutionary masterpiece. But for millions of years, it remains a solitary marvel. It is a mansion in a world of studio apartments, but it is still just a single dwelling. The next great leap will not be an internal innovation, but a social one. The future of life depends on learning to live together, on moving from the individual to the collective. The beginning is almost accidental. You watch as a eukaryotic cell divides, but instead of the two new cells drifting apart, they remain stuck together. This happens again and again, until you see a small, shimmering clump of identical cells, a simple colony. At this stage, it's not a true organism. It's more like a loose affiliation of neighbors, each one still responsible for finding its own food and carrying out all the functions of life. But there's a small advantage to this arrangement: safety in numbers. A predator is less likely to eat a whole clump than a single cell. The true revolution happens when these neighbors begin to specialize. You see it happening in a growing colony. The cells on the outside of the clump are exposed to the environment, so they develop tougher cell walls, becoming a protective skin. The cells on the inside, shielded from the world, might become responsible for digestion and nutrient distribution. Other cells might grow long, whip-like tails called flagella, and by coordinating their beating, they can propel the entire colony through the water. This is the moment a simple clump becomes a single, coordinated being. It's the birth of multicellular life. The whole has become greater than the sum of its parts. Life's new motto is, "Many hands make light work." To see this principle in action, you can look at one of the earliest and simplest examples of this new lifestyle: a primitive sponge. It may look like a single animal, but it's better understood as a highly organized city of cooperative cells. There are collar cells with tiny whips that beat the water, creating a current and filtering out microscopic food particles. There are amoebocyte cells that act as a transport and delivery service, carrying nutrients from the collar cells to the rest of the colony. There are porocytes that form the city's gates, allowing water to flow in. Each cell has a job, and the survival of the whole depends on this division of labor. But there's another, even more profound innovation brewing in these primordial seas, one that will supercharge the engine of evolution itself. For 2 billion years, life has reproduced asexually, by cloning. It's a simple, effective strategy, but it produces genetically identical offspring. Evolution can only happen through rare, random mutations. It's a slow and plodding process. Now, some organisms, like an early red alga called Bangiomorpha, develop an entirely new method: sexual reproduction. Instead of one parent creating a clone, two parents combine their genetic information to create a unique offspring. This invention is an absolute game changer. It's like shuffling a deck of cards with every new hand. It creates an enormous amount of genetic variation in every generation, giving natural selection a vast new library of traits to work with. Favorable gene combinations can be brought together quickly, while unfavorable ones can be discarded. The pace of evolution, which has been glacial for eons, is about to accelerate dramatically. While life is mastering these new forms of cooperation, the planet itself is undergoing its own grand assembly. The continents, which have been drifting and bumping around for billions of years, are now converging. You watch from a distance as landmass after landmass collides in a slow-motion geological crash. Mountain ranges buckle and rise as the crust crumples. This process eventually brings nearly all of the Earth's continental crust together into a single colossal supercontinent that scientists call Rodinia. You float over this immense alien world. It stretches from pole to pole, a vast empty expanse of rock and sand under a blue sky. The interior of Rodinia is an extreme desert, thousands of miles from the nearest drop of ocean water. The sun beats down on a silent, barren landscape. There are no plants, no animals, no soil. Life is still almost entirely confined to the oceans, clinging to the coastlines of this giant landmass. The stage is now perfectly set for an explosion of complexity. The biological toolkit is complete. We have the high-energy eukaryotic cell, the ability to build large bodies through multicellularity, and the rapid, innovative power of sexual reproduction. Life is a coiled spring, ready to unleash a torrent of new forms. But the formation of Rodinia, this great geological triumph, has sown the seeds of the planet's next great catastrophe. A supercontinent is an unstable thing. The immense heat trapped beneath it will soon begin to tear it apart. And this breakup will have devastating consequences for the global climate, setting the stage for the longest and deepest ice age in Earth's history. Before life can explode, it must first learn to survive the deep freeze. The great supercontinent of Rodinia, a triumph of geological construction, was doomed from the very start. Like a giant blanket laid over the planet's interior, it began to trap the immense heat rising from the mantle. Deep beneath the barren, rocky plains, the world's inner fire began to push upward, weakening the continental crust, preparing to tear it asunder. You watch as great cracks, or rifts, begin to form across the landmass. Volcanoes erupt along these new fault lines, and the single continent begins to break apart into smaller pieces. This continental breakup sets in motion a chain of events that will plunge the entire world into the longest and most severe ice age in its history. As the new, smaller continents drift apart, they create thousands of miles of new coastline. More coast means more moisture evaporating from the oceans, which in turn means more rain. And this rain, falling through an atmosphere rich in carbon dioxide, becomes a weak carbonic acid. For millions of years, this acid rain falls on the vast fields of fresh, exposed rock, reacting with the silicate minerals in a process called chemical weathering. This reaction is the planet's primary long-term thermostat, as it pulls enormous quantities of CO2 out of the atmosphere and locks it away in carbonate rocks on the seafloor. With the continents conveniently breaking up in the warm, wet tropics, this planetary thermostat gets stuck in the on position, and the CO2 levels begin to plummet. The planet starts to cool. Ice sheets, which have been absent for eons, begin to form at the poles. And now, a terrifying feedback loop kicks in. Ice is white, and it is far more reflective than dark rock or blue water. This reflectivity is called albedo. As the ice sheets grow, they reflect more of the sun's energy back into space, which makes the planet even cooler. The cooler temperatures allow the ice sheets to grow even larger, which in turn reflect even more sunlight. It's a runaway process, a one-way slide into a planetary deep freeze. You watch from space as the white caps at the poles creep relentlessly downwards. They spread across the continents and begin to cover the seas. The slide accelerates until the last band of blue, open water at the equator freezes over. The Earth has become a perfect, glittering white snowball. This is the Cryogenian Period, the time of the Great Ice. The planet is encased in a sheet of ice that may be miles thick in places, stretching unbroken from pole to pole. The silence is absolute. The oceans are sealed beneath a frozen lid, plunged into a dark, stagnant stillness. For the new, fragile, multicellular life that was just beginning to emerge, this is a catastrophe, a mass extinction event on a global scale. Most life is snuffed out by the cold and the dark. But life is stubborn. In the most extreme and unlikely of places, it clings on. Deep beneath the ice on the sunless sea floor, volcanic hydrothermal vents still pump out heat and chemical nutrients, creating small, isolated oases of warmth where microbial communities can survive. On the surface, in the thin ice near the equator where the sun is strongest, small pockets of liquid water might form around dark, heat-absorbing volcanic dust, creating tiny, self-contained ecosystems for hardy algae. And this is where scientists still have a lively debate. Was it a hard snowball? A completely frozen world as you see before you? Or was it a slush ball, with a band of open, slushy water remaining around the equator? A slush ball would have made survival much easier, providing a much larger refuge for life to wait out the long winter. The geological evidence is ambiguous, leaving room for both of these chilling possibilities. Whether hard snowball or slush ball, the planet is trapped. The high albedo of the ice reflects so much sunlight that it seems there's no way for the world to ever warm up again. But the ice has made a fatal error. It has silenced the planet's thermostat, but it has not silenced its engine. The ice can cover the volcanoes, but it cannot stop them. For millions of years, through cracks in the miles-thick glaciers and from vents on the seafloor, volcanoes continue to erupt, pumping colossal amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Normally, the rain and the oceans would absorb this CO2, keeping it in balance. But with the world frozen solid, there is no rain, and the oceans are sealed. The planetary thermostat is broken. The CO2 has nowhere to go. For tens of millions of years, the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere builds and builds, reaching levels hundreds, perhaps thousands of times higher than today. Eventually, a tipping point is reached. A super greenhouse effect is triggered, overwhelming the reflectivity of the ice. The planet begins to warm, and the Great Thaw begins. It is a geologically instantaneous and violent event. The glaciers melt with catastrophic speed, unleashing unimaginable floods and sending a torrent of nutrient-rich meltwater, full of minerals ground up by the moving ice, into the starving oceans. The survivors of the Great Freeze emerge from their refuges into a new world. It is a warm, shallow, hothouse planet, and its oceans have just been hit with a planetary-sized dose of fertilizer. The slate has been wiped clean, and the stage is now perfectly set for life's next great explosion. The Great Thaw has transformed the world. As you descend into the now warm, nutrient-rich oceans, you find a planet reborn. The hothouse aftermath of Snowball Earth has turned the global sea into a fertile broth, and life, having clung on in the most desperate of refuges, now seizes its chance. This is not a slow, hesitant recovery. It is an explosion. In a geological heartbeat, the seas, which have been home to nothing but microbes for 3 billion years, are suddenly filled with large, complex, multicellular organisms. This is the Avalon explosion, life's first great burst of creativity, its first rough draft of what a complex being could be. You are drifting through the twilight zone of the deep ocean, a place where sunlight barely penetrates. And here you see them. The seafloor is no longer barren rock. It is a garden of strange and wonderful forms. This is the Ediacaran Biota, named after the Ediacara Hills in Australia, where their fossils were first discovered in abundance. They are the first large life forms on Earth, some reaching several feet in length. But they are utterly alien, unlike anything alive today. They are soft-bodied, leaving behind only ghostly impressions in the fine-grained sandstone, like photographic negatives of a lost world. You glide over a field of what look like fossilized ferns, anchored to the seafloor by a small disc. This is Charnia, one of the most iconic of the Ediacaran fossils. It lived in the crushing blackness of the abyss, far too deep for photosynthesis. It must have been a filter feeder, patiently straining microscopic particles from the water. Nearby, you see a creature that looks like a flat, segmented, quilted mattress lying on the sediment. This is Dickinsonia. Some of these creatures grew to be over 4 feet long. For decades, scientists couldn't figure out if it was an animal, a fungus, or something else entirely. Recent chemical analysis of its fossils has found traces of cholesterol-like molecules, a hallmark of animal life, suggesting this strange pancake was indeed one of our earliest, most distant relatives. Then you see something truly bizarre, Trabrachidium, a small disc-shaped creature with 3 swirling spiral arms. Its body is organized around a principle of threefold symmetry. This is deeply strange, as almost every animal you know is either bilaterally symmetrical, like you, or radially symmetrical, like a jellyfish. This 3-armed oddity is a clue that in this early stage, nature was experimenting with body plans that were ultimately abandoned. It was a time of unbridled creativity, a biological Wild West before the rules had been written. And that is the great mystery of this Twilight era. What exactly were these creatures? You are floating through a gallery of evolutionary enigmas. For a long time, many paleontologists believed they were the direct ancestors of modern animals, that Dickinsonia was a kind of primitive worm, and that other forms were early jellyfish or sea pens. But the more we find, the stranger they seem. Many of them lack any obvious signs of a mouth, a gut, or any organs at all. They may have simply absorbed nutrients through their skin. This has led to a more radical theory. Scientists still argue whether the Ediacaran Biota represents the dawn of animal life, or if it was a completely separate evolutionary experiment that ultimately failed. Perhaps it was a lost kingdom of life, the Vendobionta, which had its own unique way of building large bodies, a way that had nothing to do with the animals that would come later. In this view, these strange beings were not our ancestors, but an entirely different form of life that held sway over the planet for a few tens of millions of years before vanishing completely, leaving the stage clear for the true animal kingdom to arise. But something else is happening in this quiet, quilted world. For the first time, life is on the move. Among the fossil impressions of the Ediacaran creatures, paleontologists have found other, more subtle clues. Trace fossils. These are the preserved tracks, trails, and burrows of organisms moving through the mud. You can see a faint, meandering line in the sediment, the record of a small, worm-like creature's journey millions of years ago. This is a monumental development. For 3 billion years, life had been largely passive and stationary. Now, creatures are actively exploring their environment, likely searching for food. This marks the beginning of behavior, the first hint of nerves and muscles working together. The Ediacaran world, this first draft of complex life, is coming to a close. As you watch the final millennia of the period tick by, the strange, quilted giants begin to disappear from the fossil record. The garden is thinning out. The reasons for their decline are debated. Perhaps a change in ocean chemistry, or perhaps they were simply outcompeted by a new kind of organism that was emerging from the shadows. The era of soft, gentle, passive life is ending. A new evolutionary arms race is about to begin, and the key innovation will be a simple one: armor. The twilight is fading, and a much harder, sharper, and more dangerous dawn is about to break. The dawn breaks on a new geological period, the Cambrian, and it is a dawn of unprecedented violence and creativity. The slow, quiet, experimental world of the Ediacaran is swept away in an instant. You are now witnessing the single most explosive burst of evolution in the planet's history, the Cambrian Explosion. It is life's Big Bang. In a geological window of just 10 to 20 million years, a mere blink of an eye, the seas, which had been home to simple, soft-bodied quilts and blobs, are suddenly, miraculously teeming with almost every major animal body plan, or phylum, that exists today. Worms, mollusks, arthropods, and even the first vertebrates. All of their ancestors burst onto the scene in this bewildering flurry of creation. The secret to this revolution is a new technology that life has just mastered: biomineralization. This is the ability to take minerals from the seawater and build hard, durable body parts. Shells, spines, teeth, and external skeletons, armor, suddenly appear in the fossil record. This innovation is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it offers a vital defense against a dangerous new threat. On the other, it provides a rigid framework for muscles to attach to, allowing for powerful, controlled movement. The gentle, floating garden of the Ediacaran has become a brutal, clanking battlefield. And every battlefield needs its monsters. Lurking in the Cambrian seas is the planet's first great super-predator, Anomalocaris. It is a terrifying and bizarre creature, growing up to 3 feet long, a giant in this new world. It propels itself through the water with undulating fins, its head dominated by 2 large, stalked compound eyes, giving it sharp vision. At the front of its face are 2 formidable, spiny, grasping arms for seizing prey, and beneath them, a strange, square-shaped mouth lined with grinding, tooth-like plates, perfect for crushing the new, hard shells of its victims. The existence of Anomalocaris is clear scientific evidence that a new force was driving evolution: predation. This was the beginning of a true evolutionary arms race. For every creature that evolved a thicker shell, a predator evolved a stronger claw. The seas are now a gallery of nature's wildest experiments. The most successful and iconic creatures of this new age are the trilobites. These are arthropods, distant relatives of insects and crabs, and they are everywhere. They are covered in intricate exoskeletons and are among the first creatures to evolve complex, multi-lensed eyes. You can see them scuttling along the sea floor, a testament to the success of their armored design. But there are other, stranger beings. You see Hallucigenia, a tiny worm-like creature that walks on stilt-like spines and has a row of grasping tentacles on its back. For decades, paleontologists couldn't even figure out which way was up. Nearby is Wiwaxia, a slug-like creature covered in a shimmering coat of mail made from scales and long, defensive spines. It looks like a medieval knight's weapon come to life. Amidst this chaos of shells and claws, you spot a small, unassuming creature that is easily overlooked. It's a flattened, leaf-shaped swimmer, only a couple of inches long, wriggling through the water. This is Pangaea. It has no armor, no spines, no obvious weapons. But it possesses something new and revolutionary on the inside, a flexible, rod-like structure running down its back called a notochord. This is a primitive nerve cord, the precursor to a true backbone. Pangaea is one of the first chordates, a member of the phylum that will one day give rise to all fish, all amphibians, all reptiles, all dinosaurs, and all mammals, including you. In this humble, defenseless swimmer, you are looking at your own unimaginably ancient great-great-great-grand ancestor. What could have possibly triggered this biological Big Bang? This remains one of the most hotly debated questions in all of science. Was it chemistry? Perhaps a final surge in atmospheric oxygen levels reached a critical threshold, providing the fuel needed for the high-energy lifestyle of an active animal. Was it ecology? The evolution of the first predators like Anomalocaris may have lit the fuse, forcing a rapid arms race where prey had to evolve defenses or die, leading to an explosive diversification of forms. Or was it genetics? Perhaps the evolution of a new set of master builder genes, the Hox genes, gave life a sophisticated new genetic toolkit, allowing it to easily experiment with and construct complex new body plans. The truth is likely a combination of all three, a perfect storm of environmental opportunity, ecological pressure, and genetic potential that finally allowed the animal kingdom to burst forth in all its wonderful, terrifying glory. The Cambrian Explosion has left the world irrevocably changed. The initial chaotic burst of creation now gives way to a period of settling and refinement. You are in the Ordovician Period, and the oceans are a vibrant, bustling metropolis of life. The evolutionary arms race has produced a more stable, if still dangerous, ecosystem. The first large coral reefs are beginning to form, creating complex, three-dimensional habitats teeming with life. The trilobites, those armored masters of the Cambrian, are still scuttling everywhere, but they now share the seafloor with a profusion of brachiopods, creatures that look like clams, but are from a completely different phylum, and graceful stemmed crinoids that filter feed in the gentle currents, looking like underwater flowers. But your attention is drawn to the descendants of that humble Cambrian swimmer, Pangaea. Its legacy is beginning to take shape, and it is a strange one. You see them hovering near the seafloor, the first true vertebrates. These are the jawless fish, the ostracoderms, creatures like Arandaspis and Sacabambaspis. They are unlike any fish you know. They have no jaws, just a simple round opening for a mouth, used for sucking up detritus and algae from the mud. They are also heavily armored. Their entire front ends are encased in a solid, bony shield, with only small openings for their eyes and mouth. They look like tadpoles with helmets. This armor is not for show. The dominant predators of the Ordovician seas are not other fish, but a terrifying group of arthropods, the Eurypterids, or sea scorpions. Some of these are the size of your arm, but others will eventually evolve to be larger than a human. They are agile swimmers with powerful claws, and the slow, mud-sucking, jawless fish are their perfect prey. The heavy armor is the only thing standing between these first vertebrates and total annihilation. For millions of years, our ancestors live as terrified, armored mud-eaters, hiding from giant bugs. But deep within their anatomy, a revolution is brewing. The frontmost set of gill arches, the bony structures that support the gills and allow the fish to breathe, are undergoing a remarkable transformation. Through a series of small, incremental mutations over millions of years, these gill supports are migrating forward, becoming larger, stronger, and hinged. This is a classic example of evolutionary repurposing, what scientists call exaptation, where a structure evolved for one purpose is co-opted for a completely different one. The gill arches are evolving into jaws. The first jaws are simple, but their effect is instantaneous and profound. A mouth is no longer just a passive hole for sucking up sludge. It is now a weapon. It can bite, it can grasp, it can tear. The fish are no longer limited to being prey. They can fight back. They can become predators themselves. This single innovation will change the course of life on Earth, setting the stage for every vertebrate predator that will ever live, from sharks to the Tyrannosaurus rex to the lion on the savanna. This new anatomical toolkit contributes to another, quieter explosion of life. It's not about new body plans this time, but about variety. This is the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event. Life is not just inventing, it is iterating. The number of marine genera quadruples. The world's oceans become richer and more ecologically complex than ever before. It is a time of incredible biological prosperity. The reefs expand, the seas are full, and the new jawed fish are beginning their rise to power. But the world of the Ordovician, for all its biological success, is still at the mercy of the slow, grinding power of geology. The continents have been drifting, and the massive supercontinent of Gondwana, a giant landmass made of what will become Africa, South America, Australia, Antarctica, and India, is slowly migrating southward. Its path takes it directly over the South Pole. You watch as a vast ice sheet begins to grow on the continent. As more and more of the world's water gets locked up in this polar cap, sea levels begin to plummet dramatically, draining the shallow inland seas where most life thrives. This triggers a sudden catastrophic global cooling. The first of the Big Five mass extinctions in Earth's history is underway. The Ordovician Silurian Extinction Event is a two-part catastrophe. The first wave of death is caused by the glaciation and falling sea levels. Then, as the ice melts and the seas return, the ocean chemistry is thrown into chaos, triggering a second wave of extinction. The toll is devastating. Around 85% of all marine species are wiped from the face of the Earth. The vibrant, teeming reefs are silenced. Trilobites, which had dominated for 100 million years, are decimated, their numbers forever diminished. While scientists still debate the exact sequence of events, the evidence of a massive glaciation, written in the rock layers of North Africa, points to this ancient ice age as the primary culprit. Life in the sea has suffered its first great setback. Yet even as this catastrophe unfolds in the oceans, a quiet promise of a new world is taking root. At the damp, marshy edges of the barren continents, a faint green fuzz is beginning to appear. The very first, most primitive land plants, tiny organisms resembling mosses and liverworts, are making their first tentative steps out of the water. Life's next great conquest is about to begin. The great Ordovician winter finally breaks. As the planet warms, the colossal ice sheet covering Gondwana begins to melt, releasing its hold on the world's water. Sea levels rise dramatically, flooding the continents and creating vast, shallow tropical seas, perfect incubators for life's recovery. In these warm waters, the survivors of the Great Extinction diversify with renewed vigor. The jawed fish, those beneficiaries of the new mouth technology, flourish, evolving into a myriad of new and agile forms. The oceans are once again a cradle of innovation. But the most important revolution in the history of the biosphere is no longer happening in the water. It's happening at the water's edge. Your attention is drawn to the barren, rocky coastlines. The faint green fuzz that began as a desperate experiment is now becoming a permanent feature. The invasion of the land has begun in earnest. You are witnessing the first true land plants making their stand. Kneeling down, you can see them clearly. This is a forest of the miniature. Creatures like Cooksonia, one of the earliest known land plants, stand only a few inches tall. They are models of simplicity, just thin, green, forking stems with no leaves, no flowers, and no true roots. At the tip of each stem is a tiny capsule, a sporangium, which contains the spores that will be carried by the wind to colonize new territory. Life out of water is a life of constant struggle against the elements. For these plant pioneers, the two greatest enemies are gravity and thirst. In the water, they were buoyed up, weightless. Here on land, gravity is a relentless force, and they must evolve rigid cellular structures to stand upright in the air. Water, once all-encompassing, is now a scarce resource they must desperately conserve, developing a waxy outer coating, a cuticle, to keep from drying out under the unfiltered sun. They are still tied to the damp, marshy lowlands, as they need moisture to absorb nutrients and for their primitive spores to reproduce. Historians still argue about the precise environmental pressures that drove this exodus. Was it to escape the crowded, predator-filled oceans, or simply to take advantage of the unfiltered sunlight on land? Whatever the reason, these humble green stems are planetary engineers of the highest order. They are not just living on the land, they are actively creating it. Their simple root-like structures, called rhizoids, cling to the bare rock, secreting weak acids that begin the slow, patient process of breaking the stone down. As these plants die and decompose, their organic matter mixes with the rock dust, creating the world's very first soil. For billions of years, the land has been nothing but sterile rock, sand, and dust. Now these tiny plants are laying the foundation for every forest, every jungle, and every meadow that will ever exist. They are transforming the planet's surface and its atmosphere, drawing down CO2 and pumping out yet more oxygen. And where the plants go, the animals will follow. A new world of food and opportunity has opened up, and the first creatures to seize it are the arthropods. They are uniquely pre-qualified for the journey. Their rigid external skeleton, the exoskeleton that protected them from predators in the sea, now serves a new purpose as a personal suit of armor against dehydration and a structural support system against the pull of gravity. Their jointed legs, evolved for scuttling across the sea floor, work just as well for walking on dry land. You watch as the first animal pioneers, the ancestors of scorpions, centipedes, and spiders, venture out of the water, leaving the first animal footprints ever pressed into the terrestrial mud. For a long time, the only evidence of these pioneers was indirect, in the form of fossilized tracks. But then, a remarkable discovery was made in a piece of Silurian stone from Scotland. It was the fossil of a tiny millipede, less than half an inch long, named Pneumodesmus pneumani. And under the microscope, an incredible detail was preserved. Tiny holes, called spiracles, running along the sides of its body. These are the openings that arthropods use to breathe air. This was the smoking gun, the first definitive fossilized proof of an air-breathing animal. You are looking at the legacy of the first creature to ever take a breath of fresh air. But while these tiny millipedes and thumb-sized plants are waging their quiet campaign to conquer the continents, you must not forget that the oceans are still the center of the action, and they are ruled by giants. You dive back into the warm Silurian seas and come face to face with a monster. The sea scorpions, the eurypterids, have grown to terrifying proportions, some species now reaching over 6 feet in length. They are the apex predators of this world, a nightmare of claws and armored plates. The contrast is jarring. On land, the largest animal is a half-inch millipede. In the sea, it is a bug the size of a crocodile. The great conquest of the land is still in its infancy, a fragile green fringe on a world of barren rock. But the seeds of a new global ecosystem have been firmly planted. You return to the oceans, and they are now unequivocally the domain of the vertebrates. This is the Devonian period, and it has rightly earned its title as the Age of Fishes. The seas are a shimmering, swirling kaleidoscope of piscine life, a testament to the success of the jaw and the backbone. The humble, armored mudsuckers of the Ordovician have given way to a dynasty of powerful and diverse swimmers. The first sharks, sleek and cartilaginous, patrol the reefs, their design already honed to a predator's perfection. But they are not yet the kings of this realm. That title belongs to a terrifying and heavily armored group called the Placoderms. You come face to face with their undisputed emperor, Dunkleosteus. It is a monster of nightmarish proportions, the size of a modern school bus, its head and shoulders encased in thick, impenetrable bone armor. It has no teeth. Instead, it possesses something far more frightening. 2 massive bony plates that jut from its jaws, forming a gigantic, self-sharpening guillotine. As it closes its mouth, the plates slide against each other, honing their edges to a razor sharpness. It is the apex predator of the Devonian world, a swimming tank with a bite that could shear a shark in half. But for all their power, the placoderms are an evolutionary dead end. The future of the vertebrates lies with a much humbler group of fish, lurking not in the open ocean, but in the shallow freshwater swamps and rivers of the continents. Your focus shifts to one of these murky pools. Here, you find the lobe-finned fish. At a glance, they don't look as impressive as a shark or a Dunkleosteus, but look closer at their fins. Unlike the thin, papery ray fins of most fish, their fins are fleshy, muscular, and supported by a branching arrangement of sturdy bones, an arrangement that is strikingly similar to the bone structure of your own arm and leg. These fins are not just for steering, they are powerful paddles, capable of propelling the fish through thick aquatic vegetation and, crucially, propping them up on the muddy bottom. In these shallow, crowded, and often oxygen-poor waters, a new set of skills is needed. And here, you meet the star of the show, a creature that beautifully bridges the gap between 2 worlds. This is Tiktaalik, the fishapod. It is a perfect transitional fossil, a living, breathing mosaic of fish and land dweller. It has the scales, gills, and fins of a fish, undeniable proof of its aquatic ancestry. But it also has traits that foreshadow the great leap to come. Its skull is flattened like a crocodile's, with its eyes perched on top, perfect for peering above the water's surface. Unlike any fish before it, it has a mobile neck, allowing it to turn its head without moving its entire body. And most importantly, within those fleshy lobe fins are robust wrist and finger-like bones, strong enough to support its body weight. You can picture it perfectly, resting in the shallows, doing a kind of primitive push-up, holding its head above the water to gulp air or to watch for the giant dragonflies that are now beginning to buzz through the air. It is a fish that is on the very verge of taking a walk. While Tiktaalik is doing its push-ups, the land it is looking at has become a different world. The tiny thumb-sized plants of the Silurian have given rise to the planet's first true forests. They are alien woods of giant club mosses, towering horsetails, and strange palm-like tree ferns that create a dense, humid canopy. Plants have now mastered all the technologies needed for a terrestrial life of scale. They have evolved vascular tissue, a kind of internal plumbing, to transport water and nutrients, allowing them to grow tall and defy gravity. They have invented broad leaves to maximize the capture of sunlight, and deep, powerful root systems to anchor themselves and draw water from the newly formed soil. But this incredible success on land is about to have devastating consequences for the sea. This is life's first great ironic tragedy. The new forests, a symbol of life's triumph, become the agents of its next great crisis. As their deep roots dig into the continents, they break up rocks and release an unprecedented flood of nutrients into the rivers, which all eventually flow into the oceans. This massive dose of fertilizer triggers colossal, world-spanning algal blooms. As these vast mats of algae die and sink, their decomposition consumes enormous amounts of oxygen, suffocating the deep oceans in a series of events now known as the Late Devonian Extinction. It is a slow, drawn-out crisis lasting for millions of years. It primarily affects marine life, particularly in the warm, shallow seas. The great reefs wither and die, and the placoderms, the armored tyrants of the age of fishes, are wiped out completely. The mighty Dunkleosteus vanishes from the seas forever. The ocean, once the sole province of life, has become a dangerous and unstable place. And in the wake of this crisis, for the descendants of Tiktaalik, the land, that new, green, oxygen-rich world, full of food and now free from the chaos of the seas, is looking more and more like a land of promise. The stage is set. The leap is about to happen. The water's edge is no longer a boundary. It is a doorway. In a shallow, muddy swamp, you witness the extraordinary event that has been millions of years in the making. A creature, a direct descendant of the lineage of Tiktaalik, hauls its body from the water and takes its first clumsy, shuffling steps onto the land. This is one of the first tetrapods, a vertebrate pioneer like Ichthyostega or Acanthostega. It is a marvel of transitional anatomy, a living bridge between two existences. Its head is still distinctly fish-like. It has a fin running along its tail, and it retains gills for breathing underwater. But it also possesses 4 short, powerful, bony limbs, complete with a startling number of distinct fingers and toes, 7 or 8 on each foot, as nature was still experimenting with the design. These are the first vertebrates to ever walk on the earth. Their new life is a delicate balancing act, a dual life that gives them their name, amphibians. They can walk on the land, their new lungs gulping the thick, energy-rich air. Here, they find a world of opportunity, a buffet of giant insects and other arthropods that have had the land to themselves for millions of years. But they are still umbilically tied to the water. Their skin is not waterproof. It must remain moist to assist in respiration. If they stray too far from the swamp, they will dry out and die. And, most importantly, they must return to the water to reproduce. Their eggs are soft, gelatinous spheres, with no protective shell to shield them from the dry air. They are still children of the swamp, with 1 foot in the water and 1 foot on the land. And what a land it is! You pull your focus back to see the world they have inherited. This is the Carboniferous Period, and it is a global greenhouse. The climate is hot, humid, and tropical from pole to pole. But the most significant feature of this world is the air itself. It is thick with oxygen, at concentrations of up to 35%, compared to just 21% today. This oxygen is being pumped into the atmosphere by the new dominant life form on the planet, the forest. But these are not the forests you know. There are no flowers, no birdsong, no pine needles. This is an alien landscape, a vast, planet-spanning swamp forest of bizarre and gigantic plants. Towering over 100 feet into the humid sky are giant club mosses like lepidodendron, their trunks covered in a diamond-like pattern of leaf scars. Enormous horsetails called calamites, looking like colossal reeds, form dense thickets. The canopy is a sea of green from the fronds of giant tree ferns. When these behemoths die, they topple over into the stagnant, oxygen-poor swamp water below. Here, they do not fully rot away. Instead, they are slowly buried, layer upon layer, forming thick, waterlogged mats of peat. For 35 million years, this process continues unabated. Over the eons that follow, the immense pressure and heat from geological burial will compress and cook this peat, transforming it into the vast seams of coal that will one day power the Industrial Revolution. The very name of this period, the Carboniferous, means coal-bearing, a testament to the sheer biomass of these ancient forests, a legacy of ancient sunlight buried beneath our feet. This oxygen-rich atmosphere has a dramatic supercharging effect on air-breathing life, especially those with simple respiratory systems. It is the golden age of the bugs. The passive way that insects breathe, through small tubes called tracheae, limits their size in our modern, oxygen-poor world. But in the Carboniferous, this system is wildly efficient, allowing them to grow to terrifying sizes. You hear a loud buzzing sound and look up to see Meganeura, a dragonfly with the wingspan of a modern hawk, darting through the giant ferns. Scuttling through the swampy undergrowth is Arthropleura, a nightmarish millipede, armored and flat-bodied, as long as a small car. Giant scorpions and oversized cockroaches are common. This is a world ruled by giant creepy crawlies, and for the new amphibians, it is a dangerous but bountiful hunting ground. For millions of years, this is the status quo. Giant plants, giant bugs, and amphibians tied to the water's edge. But even in this humid, swampy paradise, a limitation is clear. The amphibians can never truly conquer the land, as they will always be prisoners of the swamp. Toward the end of the period, you spot a new kind of creature, seemingly insignificant. It is small, lizard-like, and furtive. But it carries within it the key to true freedom, a revolutionary piece of biological technology that will change the future of life on land. It has developed the Amniotic Egg. The small, lizard-like creature you saw at the edge of the Carboniferous swamp is the vanguard of a new world order. It has unleashed a biological invention that will sever the final tie to the water and allow vertebrates to claim the entirety of the land as their own. This is the Amniotic Egg. It is nothing short of a personal spaceship for an embryo. You look closely at one of these new eggs, buried in a shallow nest in the dry soil. The tough, leathery shell protects the contents from the harsh, dry air. Inside, a series of remarkable membranes create a self-contained life support system. There is a yolk sac for food, a sac to store waste, and most importantly, the amnion, a fluid-filled membrane that creates a tiny, private pond for the developing embryo. Life no longer needs the swamp. It can now bring the swamp with it, wherever it goes. This single innovation marks the dawn of the reptiles and their cousins. Freed from the reproductive shackles of the water, they explode across the landscape, colonizing the vast, dry continental interiors that have been forever out of reach for the amphibians. And the continents themselves are undergoing their own grand consolidation. You pull back, watching from a high vantage point as the slow, inexorable dance of plate tectonics reaches its spectacular finale. Over millions of years, the world's land masses, Gondwana in the south, Laurasia in the north, have been drifting towards each other. Now they collide in the greatest geological merger in Earth's history. The crash is slow but unimaginably powerful, crumpling the edges of the continents and thrusting up massive mountain ranges, including the chain that will one day erode into the modern Appalachians. All the world's major land masses are now locked together into a single, colossal supercontinent, Pangaea. It is an immense and alien world, a single continent stretching from the South Pole to the North Pole, surrounded by a single global ocean, Panthalassa. The climate of this new world is one of extremes. The coastlines are pounded by mega monsoons, but the interior of the supercontinent is a vast, arid desert, thousands of miles from the moderating influence of the sea. It is in this challenging world of scorching sun and seasonal extremes that the new terrestrial vertebrates will truly be tested. And you might expect this new era, the Permian period, to be the dawn of the age of dinosaurs. But you would be wrong. Before the dinosaurs, the world was ruled by a different, and in many ways more fascinating, group of animals. The synapsids. These are often called mammal-like reptiles, but that's not quite right. They are not our reptilian cousins. They are our own, unimaginably distant, direct ancestors. The scientific evidence lies in a simple anatomical detail: the skull. Reptiles have two openings behind the eye socket. Dinosaurs have their own unique arrangement, but synapsids, like all mammals including you, have just one. The Permian landscape is their kingdom. You see them everywhere. The most famous is the sail-backed Dimetrodon, a formidable predator often mistaken for a dinosaur. Its most striking feature, that magnificent sail of skin supported by long spines, is a source of constant scientific debate. Was it a radiator, used to absorb the morning sun to warm up quickly and hunt before its prey was active? Was it for cooling down? Or was it simply a flamboyant billboard, a piece of social signaling to attract mates and intimidate rivals? Whatever its purpose, Dimetrodon was the apex predator of the early Permian. But as the period wore on, even more advanced and fearsome synapsids emerged. You watch as a pack of Gorgonopsians, swift, powerful predators with long, saber-like canine teeth, stalk their prey across the arid plains. These are the wolves and lions of their day, and they are part of our own family tree. The Permian world is thriving. The ecosystems are complex and stable. Herds of large, barrel-bodied, herbivorous synapsids called dinocephalians browse on the tough vegetation. There is no hint of the catastrophe that is about to unfold. The world seems secure in the reign of the synapsids. It is a vibrant, successful world, which makes what happens next all the more horrifying. Your focus shifts from the living world on the surface to the deep, silent world of geology beneath it. In the part of Pangaea that will one day become Siberia, a geological anomaly of immense scale is taking shape. A colossal plume of superheated rock, a mantle plume, is rising from the boundary of the Earth's core and mantle. It is a planetary heat blister, tens of miles wide, and it is slowly, unstoppably ascending through the mantle. As it nears the crust, the pressure begins to drop, causing the rock to melt on a scale never seen before or since. A vast reservoir of magma is pooling just beneath the surface, a ticking time bomb of planetary proportions. The thriving Permian world above has no idea that its foundation is about to crack open and unleash hell on Earth. The mantle plume, that colossal blister of heat rising from the planet's core, has reached the crust. The ground in what is now Siberia begins to tremble and split. But this is not the eruption of a single, cone-shaped volcano. Instead, the Earth's crust cracks open along immense fissures, some of them hundreds of miles long. From these gaping wounds, fiery curtains of lava begin to pour out, not in a violent explosion, but in a relentless, overwhelming flood. This is the beginning of the Siberian Traps Flood Basalt Eruption, the largest known volcanic event in the last 500 million years. You watch as, for hundreds of thousands of years, wave after wave of lava flows across the land, burying a region of Siberia larger than Western Europe under a mile-thick sea of molten rock. The sheer scale is difficult to comprehend, but the lava itself, as devastating as it is locally, is not the real killer. The true instruments of death are the invisible gases released from this planetary wound in unimaginable quantities. A chain reaction of global annihilation has begun. First comes the heat. The eruptions pump colossal amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, triggering a runaway greenhouse effect on a scale that dwarfs anything humans could conceive. Global temperatures soar by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. The oceans warm, the land bakes, and ecosystems, adapted to the stable Permian climate, begin to collapse under the thermal stress. Next comes the acid. Along with the CO2, the volcanoes vomit forth immense clouds of sulfur dioxide. This gas mixes with atmospheric water to create a brutal, planet-spanning acid rain. It falls on the land, stripping the forests of their leaves and poisoning the soil. It falls on the oceans, drastically lowering the pH of the surface waters and dissolving the shells and skeletons of countless marine organisms. The very chemistry of the planet's surface is being rewritten. And now, in the warm, acidic, and stressed oceans, the third and most terrible phase begins. Warm water cannot hold as much dissolved oxygen as cold water. The oceans begin to suffocate. As oxygen levels plummet, the water becomes stagnant and anoxic. This creates a paradise for a different kind of microbe, anaerobic, sulfate-reducing bacteria. They thrive in this oxygen-free environment, and as they feast on the decaying organic matter, they release a deadly waste product, vast quantities of hydrogen sulfide gas. You watch a new horror unfold. The oceans, once teeming with life, begin to turn a sickening, oily, pinkish-purple color, the telltale sign of these toxic bacterial blooms. The hydrogen sulfide saturates the deep water and then begins to bubble up to the surface and into the atmosphere. The world fills with the smell of rotten eggs, a planetary stench of death. This gas is not only toxic to breathe, but it also attacks and destroys the Earth's ozone layer, allowing lethal levels of UV radiation from the sun to blast the surface. Life is now being attacked from every conceivable angle: extreme heat, acid rain, lack of oxygen, toxic gas, and deadly radiation. This perfect storm of catastrophe is the Permian-Triassic Extinction Event. It is known, quite simply, as the Great Dying. It is the closest life has ever come to being completely and utterly extinguished. The numbers are staggering, almost incomprehensible. You watch as up to 96% of all marine species are wiped from existence. 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species vanish forever. The great coral reefs, which had existed for 140 million years, are gone. The insects suffer their only mass extinction in their entire history. The dominant synapsids, the rulers of the Permian and our own distant relatives, are all but annihilated. The trilobites, those ultimate survivors who had navigated the seas for 270 million years, enduring 2 previous mass extinctions, finally meet their end. Their long and storied history is over. The aftermath is a scene of profound and eerie emptiness. You drift over a post-apocalyptic world. The planet is a hot, silent, and poisoned wasteland. The once diverse forests are gone, replaced by resilient weeds and, for a time, a world dominated by fungi, feasting on the global graveyard of dead wood. The complex ecosystems that took tens of millions of years to build have been erased. It will take life more than 10 million years to fully recover from this cataclysm. The planet has been reset to zero. The Great Dying has wiped the evolutionary slate clean. And in this hot, empty world, a few hardy survivors, a group of reptiles that had been living in the shadows of the great synapsids, now find an open field of opportunity before them. The world after the Great Dying is a ghost of its former self. You are now in the early Triassic period, and the planet is caught in a stagnant, sweltering heat. The vibrant, complex ecosystems of the Permian are gone, replaced by a hardy, low-diversity cast of survivors. For millions of years, the world is dominated by what paleontologists call disaster taxa, weedy, opportunistic creatures that thrive in the aftermath of a catastrophe. The most successful of these is Lystrosaurus, a strange, pig-sized synapsid with a turtle-like beak and 2 tusks. It was one of the few of our distant relatives to survive the extinction, and in the empty world that followed, it exploded in numbers. For a time, it is estimated that Lystrosaurus made up as much as 95% of all land vertebrates on the planet. You see them everywhere, herds of them shuffling across the arid, red dust plains of Pangaea. It is a monotonous and impoverished world, but life is slowly, painstakingly beginning to recover. And in this recovery, the main beneficiaries are not the surviving synapsids, but a different group of reptiles that had been minor players in the Permian. These are the archosaurs, the ruling lizards. They are better adapted to the hot, arid conditions of the Triassic world, perhaps with more efficient water conservation and breathing. This diverse group splits early on into 2 great lineages. One branch, the Pseudosuchia, will go on to produce the entire lineage of crocodiles and their relatives. The other branch, the Avemetatarsalia, is the line that will eventually lead to pterosaurs, dinosaurs, and birds. In the middle of the Triassic, in the part of Pangaea that will one day be South America, the first true dinosaurs emerge from this second branch. But if you are expecting roaring giants, you will be disappointed. You have to search the undergrowth to find them. Creatures like Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus are small, nimble, and bipedal. Eoraptor, the dawn plunderer, is barely the size of a large chicken. For now, they are a minor part of the ecosystem, quick and agile hunters of insects and small vertebrates, but certainly not the rulers of this world. So what makes them special? What is the secret weapon that will eventually allow their descendants to conquer the planet? The evidence is in their hips. All other reptiles of the time, from lizards to the mighty crocodile relatives, have a sprawling stance. Their legs stick out from the sides of their body like a modern lizard doing a push-up. This is a powerful stance for a short burst of speed, but it's inefficient for sustained movement, as it requires twisting the torso with every step. The dinosaurs evolved a revolutionary new posture. Their hip socket is open, and their femur, or thigh bone, has a distinct head that fits directly into it, allowing their legs to be positioned vertically, directly underneath their body. This upright stance is a biomechanical masterpiece. It supports their weight with skeletal strength rather than constant muscular effort, saving huge amounts of energy. It allows for a much more efficient, straight-ahead stride, enabling greater stamina and speed. It is the key innovation that unlocks the potential for the dinosaurs to become the active, energetic, and ultimately gigantic creatures of the Jurassic and Cretaceous. They are the marathon runners in a world of sprinters. But for now, that potential is just a whisper. For most of the Triassic period, the dinosaurs are kept in their place, living in the shadows of their dominant archosaur cousins from the crocodile branch. The apex predators of this world are the Rauisuchians, like the formidable Postosuchus. This is a true Triassic monster, a 20-foot-long, half-ton predator that looks like a crocodile on long, upright legs. It is the T-Rex of its time, a powerful ambush hunter that dinosaurs would have wisely avoided. The world is finally healing. The ecosystems are becoming more diverse again. The synapsids are even making a small comeback, with the first true shrew-like mammals appearing near the end of the period. The dinosaurs are a successful but secondary group in a world ruled by other giant reptiles. It seems this might be the way of things for the foreseeable future, but the planet has one more convulsion to endure before the true age of reptiles can begin. Pangaea, that colossal continent forged in the Permian, is beginning to show signs of stress. The heat that has been building beneath it is now starting to break it apart. As the future continents of North America and Africa begin to rip away from each other, another massive volcanic event erupts. This is the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, or CAMP, another flood basalt eruption that pumps immense quantities of CO2 and other gases into the atmosphere. While not on the same apocalyptic scale as the Siberian traps, it is more than enough to trigger another global warming event and acidify the oceans. The result is the Triassic-Jurassic Extinction Event, the fourth of the Big Five. The exact mechanisms are still debated by scientists, but the result is clear. The great coral reefs are hit hard again, but on land, the extinction is remarkably selective. For reasons that are still not fully understood, the big, sprawling pseudo-Suchians, the Rauisuchians and their kin, are almost completely wiped out. The dinosaurs, however, with their efficient locomotion and perhaps a more advanced respiratory system, sail through the crisis relatively unscathed. The path is now clear. The great dying wiped the slate clean, and now this final convenient extinction has eliminated the dinosaurs' main competitors. They are no longer the underdogs. They are the inheritors of a suddenly empty world, perfectly poised and pre-adapted to to step into the vacant roles of apex predators and giant herbivores. Their long apprenticeship is over. Their 150-million-year reign is about to begin. The Triassic world, a world of arid plains and hardy survivors, gives way to a new, greener, and more vibrant era. You are now in the Jurassic Period, and the Earth is alive with the sounds of giants. The great supercontinent of Pangaea, which has dominated the planet's geography for 100 million years, is in the throes of a slow, powerful breakup. The volcanic rifting that triggered the last extinction event continues, tearing the landmass apart. A long, narrow seaway begins to open between the continents, a body of water that will one day grow to become the Atlantic Ocean. This continental divorce has a profound effect on the global climate. The vast, dry deserts of the interior are replaced by coastlines and inland seas. Moisture-laden winds can now penetrate deep into the land, and the hot, arid world of the Triassic becomes a much wetter, more tropical paradise. Global temperatures are high, and there are no polar ice caps. From pole to pole, the world is draped in lush, evergreen jungles. But these are not modern forests. You wander through a world of green monotony. There are no flowering plants, no fruit, no broad-leafed trees. The dominant flora are towering conifers, ancient trees like cycads that resemble squat palm trees, and vast, dense jungles of ferns. This planetary greenhouse, this all-you-can-eat buffet of Jurassic vegetation, provides the fuel for an evolutionary experiment in gigantism. This is the age of the sauropods, the largest land animals that will ever walk the Earth. You stand in a fern-choked clearing and feel the ground begin to tremble with rhythmic, thunderous footsteps. Out of the forest emerges a creature of impossible scale, a true titan. It is a herd of Brachiosaurus, their long necks held high like the booms of giant cranes, peacefully munching on the tops of the tallest conifers. One of them passes by, and its leg is like a living pillar, its footfall shaking your very bones. To be this big is a masterpiece of biological engineering. Their legs are thick, column-like structures positioned directly under their bodies to support their immense weight, which could exceed 50 tons. Their bones, though massive, are not solid. Like modern birds, their vertebrae are riddled with air sacs, extensions of their complex respiratory system. This makes their skeleton far lighter than it would otherwise be, a crucial adaptation for managing such a colossal frame. And their famous long necks, which allowed them to browse on an untouched food source high in the canopy, were a marvel of lightweight construction, supported by a complex system of ligaments. They are living, breathing examples of life scaling up to the absolute physical limits of bone and flesh. You see other giants, too, like the long, whip-tailed Diplodocus, a testament to the sheer success of this massive body plan. But where there are giant herbivores, there will inevitably be giant predators. This is the fundamental equation of the evolutionary arms race. Stalking these herds of sauropods are the apex predators of the Jurassic, the great theropods. You see one now, an Allosaurus, watching the herd from the cover of the cycad forest. It is a 30-foot-long killing machine, perfectly designed for its purpose. It walks on two powerful legs, its body balanced by a long, stiff tail. Its skull is a lightweight framework of bone, but its jaws are filled with long, serrated, blade-like teeth. Its primary weapons, however, are its powerful three-fingered hands, each tipped with a wicked recurved claw. It is a predator built not for chasing down the giants, but for ambushing them, for making strategic, devastating attacks on the young, the old, or the unwary. The Jurassic, however, is not just a story of giants. In another part of the forest, you encounter one of the most famous and bizarre of all dinosaurs. A herd of Stegosaurus moves slowly through the low-lying ferns. Their backs are adorned with a double row of large, kite-shaped bony plates, a feature that continues to baffle paleontologists. What were they for? Were they defensive armor? Their arrangement seems too awkward for that. Were they giant radiators and solar panels used to control the animal's body temperature? Or were they simply a flamboyant display structure, brightly colored to attract mates and intimidate rivals? The debate is one of the most enduring in dinosaur science, but there is no mystery about the other end of the animal. At the tip of its tail are 4 long, terrifying spikes. For a long time, this weapon had no formal name, until a 1982 Far Side cartoon by Gary Larson famously dubbed it the Thagomizer, after the late Thag Simmons. The name was so perfect that it has been informally adopted by paleontologists everywhere. Your journey now takes you from the land to the sky. Gliding awkwardly from tree to tree is a creature no bigger than a modern crow. It is covered in feathers, and it has well-developed wings. But as it lands on a branch, you see it has a snout full of sharp teeth, not a beak. And on the front of each wing are 3 small, clawed fingers that it uses to help it clamber through the branches. It has a long, bony tail, just like a small reptile. This is Archaeopteryx, the ancient wing. It is the perfect transitional fossil, a beautiful mosaic of dinosaurian and avian features. It is the undeniable smoking gun evidence that birds are not just related to dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs. A small, feathered branch of the theropod family tree that survived the Great Extinction and is still with us today. And what of the oceans? While the dinosaurs have conquered the land, the seas are ruled by other giant reptiles that are not dinosaurs at all. You dive into the warm Jurassic Ocean and are greeted by a school of dolphin-like ichthyosaurs, their streamlined bodies perfectly adapted for a life of speed in the open water. In the deeper waters, you see the majestic, long-necked plesiosaurs, paddling slowly with their 4 large flippers, their tiny heads darting out to snatch fish. The world is teeming with reptilian life, a dynasty at the very peak of its power, dominating every corner of the planet. The long, monotonous green reign of the ferns and conifers is about to end. As you move forward into the final chapter of the dinosaurs saga, the Cretaceous Period, you witness a revolution that will paint the world in a whole new palette of colors. For the first time in the planet's history, a plant evolves a flower. This is the dawn of the angiosperms, the flowering plants, and it is an evolutionary masterstroke that will change the face of the Earth. Until now, plant reproduction has been a rather haphazard affair, relying on the wind to carry spores and pollen, with most of it going to waste. The flower is a radically new strategy. It is a brightly colored, sweet-smelling advertisement, a billboard designed to attract a specific courier service. You watch as a primitive bee, one of the first of its kind, is lured to a magnolia-like flower. As it drinks the sugary nectar offered by the plant, it becomes dusted with pollen. When it flies to the next flower, it delivers that pollen directly where it needs to go. It is an incredibly efficient, targeted delivery system. This single innovation sparks a co-evolutionary explosion, a beautiful partnership between the plant and animal kingdoms. The insects, which have been around for a long time, now diversify into a dazzling array of new forms: bees, butterflies, moths, all evolving specialized body parts to take advantage of this new high-energy food source. In return, the plants evolve ever more elaborate and enticing flowers, developing specific colors, shapes, and scents to attract their preferred pollinators. For the first time, the world has a smell other than damp earth and decay. The air is filled with fragrance. And after the flower is pollinated, it develops another brilliant invention, the fruit, a tasty, fleshy package designed to entice a larger animal to eat it and carry the plant's seeds far and wide, depositing them in a convenient pile of fertilizer. The world is becoming more vibrant, more complex, and more interconnected than ever before. And in this new flower-decked world, the dinosaurs are at the absolute peak of their power and diversity. This is the Cretaceous, the era of the true celebrity dinosaurs. You stand in a forest clearing in what will one day be North America and watch the ultimate prehistoric drama unfold. A magnificent Triceratops, a 10-ton herbivore with a formidable 3-horned face and a massive, bony frill protecting its neck, is grazing on a bush of low-lying ferns. But it is not alone. From the shadows of the trees emerges the undisputed tyrant king of this world, Tyrannosaurus rex. It is an animal of terrifying perfection, 40 feet long with a skull the size of a refrigerator, filled with 60 railway spike-sized teeth. Its tiny 2-fingered arms seem almost comical on its massive frame, but they are a sideshow. The real weapon is its head, powered by neck muscles that allow it to deliver a bone-shattering bite with the force of several tons. Paleontologists still argue about the lifestyle of this iconic creature. Was it a noble apex predator, the lion of the Cretaceous, actively hunting down mighty prey like Triceratops? Or was it more of a giant, opportunistic scavenger, the hyena of its day, using its immense size and intimidating presence to bully smaller predators off their kills? The scientific evidence, from healed bite marks on prey fossils to the analysis of its brain structure, suggests the truth is likely a combination of both. Like most large predators, it probably wouldn't have passed up a free meal, but it was more than capable of making its own kills when it needed to. You see other famous members of the Cretaceous dynasty. A herd of duck-billed hadrosaurs communicates with deep, resonant calls amplified by the strange, hollow crests on their heads. And moving through the undergrowth like a living tank is an Ankylosaurus, its back covered in a thick armor of bony plates and its tail armed with a massive, bone-crushing club. The dinosaurs have filled every conceivable terrestrial niche. But your image of these creatures, shaped by a century of museum skeletons and classic movies, is in for a shock. You focus on a smaller predator, a pack of dromaeosaurs, the group popularly known as raptors, but the creature you see is not the scaly green lizard of the cinema. Fossil discoveries, particularly from China, have provided undeniable proof that many theropod dinosaurs, especially the lineage that includes Velociraptor and its kin, were covered from head to toe in a thick coat of feathers. These feathers were likely not for flight, at least not at first. They would have provided insulation, like the downy coat of a modern bird, and their patterns and colors would have been used for camouflage and for social display. You are looking at a creature that is less a giant lizard and more of a terrifying 6-foot-tall, predatory bird with a sickle claw on its foot and a mouth full of teeth. Meanwhile, the true birds, the descendants of Archaeopteryx, have continued to evolve. You see creatures like Confucius ornis flocking in the trees. They now have true toothless beaks and more advanced flight capabilities. They share the skies with the last of the pterosaurs, the giant winged reptiles that are not dinosaurs. Some of these, like the colossal Quetzalcoatlus, have a wingspan the size of a modern fighter jet, making them the largest flying creatures of all time. The world is a masterpiece of life. The continents have drifted into a configuration that is almost recognizable to a modern eye. The climate is warm and stable. The oceans and the land are teeming with a diversity of life that may have been unparalleled in the planet's history. Everything seems perfect, a dynasty in its glorious, eternal prime. There is absolutely no sign, no warning of the cosmic rock that is at this very moment silently hurtling through the blackness of space. It is 6 miles wide, and it is on a direct collision course with a small peninsula in the Gulf of Mexico. The final day of the dinosaurs has begun, and they have no idea. The final day of the Cretaceous dawns like any other in the past 80 million years. You are standing in a humid subtropical forest in what will one day be the Hell Creek Formation of Montana. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting vegetation. In a clearing, a herd of Edmontosaurus browses peacefully on the lush foliage. The world is stable, predictable, and utterly dominated by the reptilian dynasty. There is no omen in the sky, no sign that this is the last day of an entire era. In the distance you hear a low, guttural roar. A drama as old as the Jurassic is about to play out one last time. High above, in the silent, black vacuum of space, the agent of doom makes its final approach. It is an asteroid, a solid chunk of rock and metal a little over 6 miles wide, a stray fragment from the great belt between Mars and Jupiter. For millions of years, it has been tumbling through the solar system on an orbit that was destined to intersect with Earth's. It enters the atmosphere at a staggering speed, somewhere around 45,000 miles per hour, 20 times faster than a rifle bullet. For a few brief, terrible seconds, it becomes a new star in the sky, a searing point of light that outshines the sun, visible across the entire continent. And then it strikes. The asteroid slams into the shallow tropical waters of the Gulf of Mexico, just off the coast of the modern-day Yucatan Peninsula. The moment of impact is an event of truly planetary scale, an explosion with the energy of more than 100 trillion tons of TNT, or several billion Hiroshima bombs detonating at once. The asteroid and the section of Earth's crust it hits do not crater. They are instantly vaporized in a flash of unimaginable heat and light. Everything within a 1,000-mile radius, dinosaurs, forests, the very sea itself, is annihilated in less than a second. The immediate aftermath is a series of escalating horrors. The impact carves a transient crater over 100 miles wide and 20 miles deep into the Earth, sending a colossal shockwave of superheated air and plasma blasting outwards at supersonic speeds, incinerating everything in its path. The impact also displaces 1 trillion tons of water, creating a mega tsunami of impossible scale. A wave, perhaps thousands of feet high, races outwards from the impact site, scouring the coastlines of the Gulf and washing hundreds of miles inland, a wall of water that erases entire ecosystems. But the most devastating effect is yet to come. The impact has blasted a colossal amount of vaporized and molten rock high above the atmosphere into the cold of space. Now, this ejector begins to fall back to Earth. As these trillions of tiny glass beads, called spherules, re-enter the atmosphere all over the world, they heat up through friction, just like a meteor. The entire sky, from pole to pole, begins to glow a dull, terrifying red. The atmosphere becomes a planetary-scale broiler oven. The radiant heat at ground level becomes so intense that it is hot enough to cook flesh. Any animal caught out in the open is roasted alive. The dry leaves and forests below, baked by this celestial oven, ignite. A firestorm of global proportions begins to rage, incinerating a huge portion of the planet's forests and pumping even more soot and ash into the sky. After the fire comes the dark and the cold. The colossal cloud of fine dust from the vaporized asteroid and crust, combined with the thick soot from the global firestorms, is blasted into the stratosphere. There, it spreads out, enveloping the entire planet in a thick, impenetrable shroud. Sunlight can no longer reach the surface. The sky turns black, and a profound, unnatural darkness falls over the Earth, a darkness that may have lasted for several years. With the sun blocked, global temperatures plummet. The warm greenhouse world of the dinosaurs is plunged into a freezing impact winter. This is the final silent killer. In the darkness, photosynthesis grinds to a halt. On land and in the oceans, the plants and the plankton, the very foundation of the global food chain, die off. The great herbivorous dinosaurs, deprived of their food, starve to death in the cold and the dark. The mighty carnivores that hunted them soon follow. The giant marine reptiles in the oceans and the pterosaurs in the skies suffer the same fate. When the dust finally settles years later, the world is a graveyard. In total, an estimated 75% of all species on Earth have been wiped out forever. For over a century, the cause of this great extinction was a mystery. But in 1980, a team of scientists led by Luis and Walter Alvarez made a breakthrough discovery. While studying a layer of clay in Italy that precisely marked the boundary between the Cretaceous and the subsequent Paleogene period, the KPG boundary, they found it was extraordinarily rich in the element iridium. Iridium is extremely rare in the Earth's crust, but it is abundant in asteroids. This iridium-rich layer has since been found at the same geological boundary all over the world. It is the chemical fingerprint of the impact, the thin layer of dust from the vaporized asteroid that settled over the entire planet. This discovery, combined with the later identification of the massive, buried Chicxulub crater in the Yucatan, provided the definitive evidence for this catastrophic day. Scientists still debate whether the impact was the sole killer, or if it was the final blow to an already stressed ecosystem, weakened by the massive volcanic eruptions of the Deccan Traps in India. But its central role in the Great Dying is now beyond doubt. The 150 million year reign of the non-avian dinosaurs is over. The dust is settling. After years of darkness, a weak, hazy sunlight finally breaks through the shroud and touches the surface of a wounded and silent world. You are standing in what remains of a once thriving forest. The giant trees are gone, replaced by charred stumps and a low, monotonous carpet of hardy ferns, the first plants to recolonize the scorched earth. The air is cool and damp, and the world is eerily quiet. The thunderous footsteps and deafening roars of the dinosaurs are gone forever, a silence that will never be broken. This is the dawn of a new geological era, the Cenozoic, the era of new life. It is a world that belongs to the survivors. And who are they? They are the meek, the small, the adaptable. They are the creatures that were small enough to hide from the initial blast of heat, burrowing underground or sheltering in caves. They are the ones whose metabolisms were slow enough to endure the long years of cold and starvation. You see them emerging tentatively into this new, empty world. A crocodile, having survived in a freshwater river, slinks into the water. A turtle, a master of hunkering down, pokes its head from its shell. And fluttering from the branches of a skeletal tree is a flock of small birds, the only dinosaurs to make it through the apocalypse, the living legacy of the mighty theropods. And among these survivors, scurrying from a burrow at the base of a dead tree, is your own great-great-great-grand ancestor. This is an early mammal. Throughout the entire 150 million year reign of the dinosaurs, mammals had been living a life in the shadows. They were small, mostly nocturnal, shrew-like creatures, spending their lives hiding in the undergrowth, snatching insects at night, and doing their absolute best to avoid being stepped on or eaten by the giants that ruled the day. But the very traits that kept them marginal for so long have now become their salvation. Their small size was their greatest asset. It allowed them to find shelter from the worst of the cataclysm and to subsist on a much smaller amount of food. And their diet was key. While the giant herbivores that relied on fresh greens starved, these early mammals were generalists, eating insects, worms, roots, and seeds, things they could still find in the devastated ecosystem. Perhaps most importantly, they were warm-blooded. This internal furnace, a costly luxury in the warm Cretaceous, became a vital survival tool in the freezing darkness of the impact winter, allowing them to remain active while the cold-blooded reptiles grew sluggish and died. Now, in this new world, they emerge from the shadows into a planet of ghosts, a world of open opportunities. Every major ecological niche that had been occupied by a non-avian dinosaur is now vacant. Who will be the new top predator? Who will be the new giant herbivore? The planet is a vast, empty stage, and an evolutionary gold rush is about to begin. The mammals, with their warm blood, their milk for nourishing young, and their adaptable teeth, seize this opportunity with an explosive burst of creativity. It is an adaptive radiation on a continental scale. Within just a few million years, a geological heartbeat, they evolve from small, furtive insect eaters into a bewildering array of new forms, rapidly filling the empty roles. You watch as some groups grow larger, becoming the new herbivores, browsers and grazers of the recovering forests and plains. Others become dedicated predators, like the fierce creodonts, early carnivorous mammals that for a time fill the role of the great theropods. Some mammals, in a strange evolutionary twist, return to the water, their descendants becoming the whales and dolphins of the new oceans. Others take to the air, their forelimbs evolving into wings, becoming the first bats. And many of them take to the trees. But it is not an uncontested victory for the mammals. Remember those other survivors, the avian dinosaurs. They have their own ideas about who should rule this new world. In South America, which for a time is an isolated island continent, this evolutionary experiment produces a lineage of apex predators that are truly terrifying. You see one now, standing 7 feet tall on a grassy savanna. It is a Phorus racid, a terror bird. It is a giant, flightless, carnivorous bird, a direct descendant of the raptor lineage. It cannot fly, but its long, powerful legs make it a devastatingly fast runner, and its head is armed with a massive, hooked beak, like a giant eagle's, which it uses as a battle axe to strike and kill its mammalian prey. For millions of years in some parts of the world, These terror birds are the undisputed kings, a final, frightening echo of the age of dinosaurs. The exact reason for their eventual decline is still debated, but for a long time, they were a vivid reminder that the dinosaurs never truly left. Your focus now shifts to the quiet world of the canopy, where a new mammalian dynasty is beginning. Among the groups that took to the trees, a special lineage is emerging: the primates. You see one of the earliest, a creature like Plesiodapis. It looks something like a squirrel or a tree shrew, but it is developing the key adaptations that will define its lineage. Its paws are evolving into grasping hands and feet, with nimble fingers and opposable thumbs for securely gripping branches. Its eyes, which in most mammals are on the sides of the head, are migrating to the front. This provides overlapping fields of vision, creating true stereoscopic 3D vision. This is a vital skill for a life spent leaping from branch to branch, where misjudging a distance means a fatal fall. And to process all of this complex visual information, and to coordinate the precise movements needed for an arboreal life, its brain is becoming larger and more complex. Vision, not smell, is becoming its primary sense. In this small, nocturnal, tree-dwelling creature, the fundamental traits that will one day lead to tool use, to art, and to self-awareness are being forged in the quiet laboratory of the treetops. The warm, gentle world that the mammals inherited is beginning to change. The long, stable, hothouse climate of the early Cenozoic is coming to an end. You watch as, over millions of years, the planet embarks on a long, slow, and intermittent cooling trend. Antarctica, which had been covered in temperate forests, separates from Australia and South America, allowing a cold circumpolar current to isolate it. A massive ice sheet begins to grow over the southern continent for the first time in eons. The continents themselves are now nearing their modern positions, and this new arrangement of land and sea is fundamentally altering the patterns of ocean currents and global weather. The world is getting colder and drier. In the forests of Africa and Eurasia, the primate lineage has been flourishing. They have diversified into a myriad of forms. You see the great split that separates the new world monkeys, which will colonize South America, from the old world monkeys and apes that remain in Africa and Asia. During the Miocene epoch, it is the apes that are the true stars of the primate world. While today we have only a handful of surviving great ape species, the Miocene was their golden age. The world was full of a bewildering variety of apes, from small, nimble tree dwellers to large, ground-dwelling creatures like the massive Gigantopithecus. For a time, they were far more successful and diverse than the monkeys. But in Africa, the continent of our birth, a dramatic geological event is unfolding that will change the fate of one specific group of apes forever. The Earth's crust is being stretched and torn apart. You watch as a colossal rift valley, the Great Rift Valley, begins to form. A massive scar that will eventually run for thousands of miles down the eastern side of the continent. As the land on either side of the rift is pushed upwards, it creates a long chain of high mountains and volcanoes. These mountains act as a giant wall, a weather barrier. They begin to block the steady flow of moisture coming from the Atlantic Ocean. East Africa is plunged into a rain shadow. The world of the East African apes begins to wither and die. The lush, continuous, continent-spanning tropical rainforest they have known for millions of years starts to shrink and fragment. In its place, a new, more open and challenging landscape emerges. a mosaic of dry woodlands, riverine forests, and vast open grasslands, the savanna. The apes living in this region are now faced with a stark and unforgiving choice. Retreat westward with the dwindling rainforests, or learn to survive in this new, fragmented world. For those that remain, life is no longer a simple matter of reaching for the next piece of fruit on the next branch. The resources are now scattered. A patch of fruit trees might be separated from a reliable water source by a mile of open, sun-baked grassland. To survive, these apes are forced down from the relative safety of the trees and must now traverse these dangerous, exposed clearings. And it is this immense environmental pressure that drives the evolution of the single most important and consequential adaptation in human history: bipedalism. The ability to walk on two legs. You travel to a woodland in ancient Chad around 7 million years ago and meet one of the very first members of our own unique lineage, the hominins. This is a creature like Sahelanthropus chadensis. It still has many ape-like features: a small, chimp-sized brain, a jutting face, and long arms for climbing. But its fossilized skull holds a crucial secret. The foramen magnum, the hole where the spinal cord connects to the skull, is not at the back, like in a four-legged ape. It is positioned directly underneath the skull. This is the anatomical smoking gun, the definitive evidence that this creature held its head balanced atop an upright spine. It was beginning to walk on two legs. This was not a sudden switch, but a slow, gradual transition. Early hominins like Sahelanthropus and the later Ardipithecus were creatures of two worlds, still skilled climbers in the trees, but increasingly comfortable walking upright on the ground. But why this strange new form of locomotion? Scientists still debate the exact combination of pressures that favored it, but the advantages in this new savanna environment were immense. First, and most famously, it freed the hands. An animal walking on two legs can now use its hands for other tasks while on the move: to carry precious high-energy food back to a safe home base to share with its family, to carry helpless infants, and millions of years down the line, to carry the first stone tools. Second, it provided a better view. Standing upright allows you to see over the tall savanna grass, a vital advantage for spotting approaching predators like the great cats that were also evolving in this environment, or for locating distant resources. But perhaps the most crucial advantage was simple efficiency. For traveling long distances, walking on two legs is far more energetically efficient than the knuckle walking of a chimpanzee or gorilla. In a world where your next meal might be miles away across an open plain, conserving energy is a matter of life and death. Bipedalism was the key that unlocked the savanna and all its resources. It was the first, hesitant but irreversible step on the long road that separates our lineage from that of all other apes. The path that began with that first tentative, upright step now leads you to the dry, open plains of East Africa around 3 million years ago. Here, you meet the next great success story in the hominin saga, the Australopithecines. You see a small group of them foraging near a line of acacia trees. They are a perfect mosaic of the old and the new. From the waist down, they are remarkably human-like. Their hips, legs, and feet are clearly adapted for efficient, two-legged walking across the savanna. But from the waist up, they retain the hallmarks of their ape ancestry: long, powerful arms and curved fingers, suggesting they still spent a good deal of time climbing trees for safety or for food. And when you look at their faces, you see their brains are still small, barely larger than a modern chimpanzee's. The most famous individual from this group is, of course, Lucy, a remarkably complete skeleton of the species Australopithecus afarensis discovered in Ethiopia in 1974. She and her kind were the dominant hominins on the African landscape for over 1 million years, a testament to the success of their hybrid, two-worlds lifestyle. They were a crucial bridge, but they were not the end of the story. The brain was still waiting for its moment. Then, around 2.5 million years ago, a new lineage appears in the fossil record. It emerges from one of the Australopithecine branches, but it is different. Its face is flatter, and its brain case is significantly larger. This is the dawn of our own genus, Homo, and its first representative is a creature called Homo habilis, the handy man. He is given this name for a profoundly important reason. His fossil remains are found alongside the very first stone tools. You crouch behind a rocky outcrop and watch a small band of habilis at work. They have found the carcass of a large antelope, perhaps killed by a saber-toothed cat that has since had its fill and moved on. The hominins are using their new invention. These are not elegant spears or crafted knives. This is the older one toolkit, the simplest and oldest of all human technologies. It consists of a roundish cobblestone, the hammerstone, and another rock, the core. With a few sharp, practiced blows, a habilis strikes the core, flaking off a razor-sharp shard of stone. This simple flake, though crude, is one of the most important inventions in history. It can do what teeth and fingernails cannot. You watch as they use these sharp flakes to slice through the tough hide of the antelope, cutting away strips of meat. Then they use the heavy, blunt core as a chopper to smash open the thick leg bones. This is the secret to their success. The brain is the most metabolically expensive organ in the body. A human brain, while only 2% of our body weight, consumes over 20% of our energy. For the brain to grow larger, it needed a new high-octane fuel source. Plants are not enough. The key was meat, and even more importantly, the calorie-rich marrow locked inside the bones. By inventing tools, Homo habilis unlocked this nutritional treasure chest. They were not yet the great hunters. They were, for the most part, resourceful scavengers, the cleanup crew of the savanna. This sets in motion the single most important positive feedback loop in our history. Better tools allow access to better food, meat and marrow. This high-quality diet provides the excess energy needed to fuel a larger, more complex brain. A larger brain can then conceive of and create even better, more sophisticated tools. This cycle, tools, food, brain, tools, will become the driving engine of human evolution for the next 2 million years. As this drama of the mind and the hand unfolds, the world itself is entering a new and turbulent phase. The long, slow, cooling trend of the Cenozoic finally culminates in the beginning of the Pleistocene epoch, the time of the Great Ice Ages. You watch as, driven by subtle periodic wobbles in the Earth's orbit, massive continental ice sheets begin to advance and retreat from the poles, locking up and releasing the world's water. The climate becomes a chaotic roller coaster of long, frigid glacial periods, punctuated by shorter, warmer interglacials. This constant, dramatic environmental instability puts a new and intense selective pressure on life. It is a world that favors not the strongest or the most specialized, but the most adaptable, the most clever, the ultimate problem solvers. And in this challenging world, a new and formidable human species emerges. Around 2 million years ago, Homo erectus, the upright man, strides onto the scene. He is a game changer. His brain is nearly twice the size of an Australopithecines. His body proportions are long, lean, and strikingly modern. The body of a creature fully committed to life on the ground, a master of long-distance walking and running, and his tools are a major leap forward. He invents the Acheulean hand axe, a beautiful, symmetrical, teardrop-shaped tool crafted from stone. Unlike a simple Oldowan chopper, this tool shows clear evidence of a mental template, of a design held in the mind of its creator. Armed with this new body, this new brain, and this new technology, Homo erectus does something no hominin has ever done before. He walks out of Africa. He becomes the first great global explorer, spreading across the Middle East into Asia, as far as China and Indonesia, and into Europe. And in these new, often colder lands, he begins to harness a power that will not only change his own destiny, but will one day change the planet itself. He is learning to control fire. The control of fire is not just a new tool, it is a fundamental reordering of life itself. For 3 billion years, the rhythm of the world has been dictated by the sun. Day is the time of activity. Night is the time of fear, a domain of predators and cold that forces creatures into hiding. Now, for the first time, a species has stolen a piece of the sun and brought it down to Earth. You are sitting with a small clan of Homo erectus at the mouth of a cave in Ice Age Europe. Outside, a bitter wind howls, and the great glaciers creak and groan in the distance. But here, in the small circle of flickering orange light, there is warmth. This captured star, this hearth, has become the center of their universe. It provides a profound psychological and physical security. The great cave bears and saber-toothed cats that hunt in the darkness will not approach the flames. The fire holds the terrifying night at bay. It allows them to extend their day, to work on tools, to socialize long after the sun has set. And most importantly, it transforms their food. You watch as they hold chunks of meat over the flames. Cooking is a form of external digestion. It breaks down tough fibers and complex proteins, making food far easier to chew and digest. It kills parasites and bacteria, making their food safer. This unlocks a huge new reservoir of calories and nutrients that were previously inaccessible, providing even more fuel for that ever-growing, energy-hungry brain. The hearth has become the first kitchen and the first living room. In the harsh, unforgiving crucible of Ice Age Europe, the descendants of these first fire-wielders continue to evolve. They become Homo heidelbergensis. They are now masters of their cold domain. You follow a hunting party as they track a herd of woolly rhinos across the frozen tundra. They are armed not with simple hand axes, but with long, finely crafted wooden spears. The discovery of a cache of these very spears at Schöningen, Germany, perfectly preserved in a coal mine for 400,000 years, provided a stunning window into their world. These are not simple sharpened sticks. They are sophisticated, ballistically designed throwing spears, a technology that requires foresight, planning, and a deep understanding of materials. Hunting a 10-ton mammoth or a furious rhino with such tools is not a task for an individual. It requires a team, a group of hunters working together with a plan, communicating and coordinating their actions. It is a sign of an increasingly complex social and cognitive world. And as the ice ages ebb and flow, becoming ever more severe, this European lineage is further forged and refined. Homo heidelbergensis evolves into a new and remarkable human species. Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals. You must discard the brutish, hunched-over caricature of the past. The Neanderthal that stands before you is a supremely successful and highly intelligent form of human. Their bodies are a masterpiece of adaptation to the cold. They are shorter and more powerfully built than modern humans, a stocky, robust physique designed to conserve heat. Their faces are dominated by a large, projecting nose, which would have helped to warm and humidify the frigid, dry air before it entered their lungs. And their brains are, on average, even slightly larger than our own. Their culture is rich and complex. You see evidence of this in a cave in the Zagros Mountains of modern-day Iraq, a place we call Shanida Cave. Here, archaeologists found the skeleton of an older Neanderthal man who had been a true invalid. He had suffered a crushing blow to the head that likely blinded him in one eye. His right arm was withered and useless, and he walked with a painful limp. Yet he lived to a ripe old age. This is the undeniable scientific evidence that he was not abandoned. His clan cared for him, fed him, and protected him for years. This is the birth of compassion. In the same cave, another burial suggests something even more profound. A man was laid to rest in a shallow grave, and analysis of the pollen found in the soil around his body suggested he may have been buried with clumps of colorful wildflowers. Archaeologists still passionately debate whether this was a true, tender funeral ritual, a sign of grief and a belief in an afterlife, or if the pollen was simply brought into the cave by burrowing rodents. But we do know they deliberately buried their dead, a behavior that hints at a mind grappling with the great mysteries of life and death. The discovery of a Neanderthal hyoid bone, a small U-shaped bone in the neck that anchors the tongue, shows that it was virtually identical to our own, meaning they had the physical capacity for complex speech. But the Neanderthals are not the only human story on the planet. As they are mastering the frozen plains of Europe, you turn your attention back to Africa. The Heidelbergensis population that remained in the ancestral homeland has not been idle. They have been living in a different world, facing different challenges, and they are on their own, separate evolutionary trajectory. A new kind of human is being born under the African sun. For a brief, fascinating moment in our planet's history, the world is home to a diverse family of intelligent, tool-making, fire-wielding humans. In the far east of Asia, the last populations of Homo erectus are still clinging on. In Europe and the Middle East, the Neanderthals are at the height of their power. In the mountains of Siberia, genetic evidence will one day reveal the existence of another, mysterious lineage, the Denisovans. And in Africa, a taller, more slender, and profoundly different kind of human is just beginning to stir. The planet of the apes has become the planet of the humans. But it is not a world destined for diversity. One of these lineages is about to undergo a revolution of the mind that will change the rules of the game forever. You leave the cold plains of Neanderthal Europe and return to the sun-drenched savannas of Africa, the great crucible of human evolution. It is here, around 300,000 years ago, that the final and most fateful human species is born. From the ancestral stock of Homo heidelbergensis, a new form emerges, Homo sapiens. You look at them, and for the first time, you see a face you truly recognize. Their skeletons are virtually identical to ours. They have the same high, vaulted skull, the same small, flat face tucked beneath the brain case, the same prominent chin. Anatomically, they are modern humans. The hardware is new, but for a very long time, Over 150,000 years, the software seems to be the same. Their tools are much like those of the Neanderthals. Effective, but technologically stagnant. They live in small bands, hunt, gather, and survive. There is little to suggest that they are special, little to hint at the world-conquering potential locked away inside that new brain. They make a few tentative forays out of Africa, but these early migrations seem to fizzle out. They are just one more kind of human on a planet of many. And then, somewhere around 70,000 years ago, a switch is flipped. A fire is lit behind the eyes. You begin to see it not in the bones, but in the things they leave behind. The archaeological record, which has been so static for millennia, suddenly explodes with novelty and creativity. You see the first evidence of projectile weapons, like finely crafted bone points for arrows or spear throwers, allowing them to hunt with a new and deadly efficiency. You find the first clear evidence of personal adornment. Necklaces made of seashell beads, drilled and strung together, found in caves hundreds of miles from the nearest coast. This is not about survival. This is about identity, about beauty, about symbolism. Then you follow them into the deep, dark, silent belly of a cave in what is now France or Spain. By the flickering light of an animal fat lamp, you witness a miracle. A human hand, your hand, is placed against the cold rock wall, and a mouthful of powdered ochre is sprayed over it, leaving a perfect, ghostly stencil. On the sweeping, uneven surfaces of the cave, they begin to paint. With charcoal and mineral pigments, they conjure into existence breathtakingly vivid and lifelike images of the world around them. Herds of bison, galloping horses, woolly mammoths, and the lions that hunt them. This is not a doodle. This is art of the highest order. This is the tangible evidence of a mind that is not just seeing the world, but is interpreting it, dreaming about it, and recreating it. This is the great cognitive revolution. What caused this sudden, astonishing leap? The leading theory is that it was not a change in the brain's size, but in its wiring. It was the final maturation of language. Not just a language for pointing at things and shouting warnings, lion, water, but a new, infinitely flexible and complex language that could communicate ideas about things that do not physically exist. This is the true superpower of Homo sapiens, the ability to create and to believe in fictions. A Neanderthal clan is bound together by intimate personal knowledge. They can cooperate effectively in a band of maybe 50 or 100 individuals. But Homo sapiens can now use language to weave a shared story, a myth. They can speak of a great lion spirit that protects their tribe, of ancestral ghosts that watch over them from a spirit world, of a tribal god that demands their loyalty. These shared myths, these fictions, allow for a new and unprecedented level of cooperation. They can now unite hundreds or even thousands of individuals who have never met, all bound together by a common belief. A band of 100 Neanderthals is formidable. But an army of 1,000 sapiens, all believing they are fighting for the glory of the same tribal spirit, is an unstoppable force. Armed with this new cognitive toolkit, they surge out of Africa once more, around 60,000 years ago. And this time, there is no stopping them. They are not necessarily stronger or tougher as individuals than the Neanderthals they meet in the Middle East and Europe. But their ability to cooperate in large, flexible groups, their superior technology, and their capacity for abstract planning give them an overwhelming advantage. What happened when these two human species met? after 500,000 years of separate evolution, is a subject of intense and fascinating debate. Was it a violent, genocidal war, a prehistoric blitzkrieg? Was it a slow, grinding competition for resources, where the more efficient sapiens simply out-hustled their cousins, pushing them into ever more marginal lands until they faded away? Or did we inadvertently kill them with new African diseases to which they had no immunity? The answer is likely a complex mix of all of these things. But we know one more startling fact from the story written in our own genes. We know that they interbred. Somewhere, in a cave in Ice Age Europe or a valley in the Middle East, a Homo sapiens and a Neanderthal looked at each other and saw not an alien, but a partner. The proof is in the DNA of most modern non-African humans, who carry, on average, 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA in their genomes. We did not just replace them. In a small but very real way, we absorbed them. But ultimately, their story comes to an end. Around 40,000 years ago, after a successful reign of nearly 300,000 years, the last Neanderthals vanish from their final refuges in Spain and Portugal. The other human lineages, like the Denisovans in Asia, suffer the same fate. For the first time in millions of years, the planet of the humans is home to only one human species. We are alone. You are now the lone human species on a planet that is finally healing from the last great pulse of the Ice Age. For tens of thousands of years, your ancestors have lived as ghosts in a world of ice, masters of survival in the harshest of environments. You follow a small band of them across the vast, frozen plains of Ice Age Europe. They are nomadic hunter-gatherers, their entire existence revolving around the movements of the great herds of megafauna. They are clothed in the thick furs of the animals they hunt, their lives a constant, intimate dance with the woolly mammoth, the giant elk, and the cave bear. Their world is one of deep, ancient knowledge, of animal tracks, of seasonal migrations, of which plants will heal and which will kill. It is a hard life, but in many ways a simple and egalitarian one. Then, around 12,000 years ago, the great planetary metronome that has dictated the rhythm of the ice ages for 2 million years clicks into a new and unfamiliar beat. The Great Thaw begins. You watch from a high vantage point as the colossal continental glaciers, miles thick in places, begin to groan, crack, and retreat. Torrents of meltwater carve new rivers into the landscape. The sea levels rise, flooding coastal plains and creating the shorelines we know today. The world is entering a new geological epoch, the Holocene, and with it comes a gift that humanity has never known before, a period of remarkable and prolonged climate stability. The wild, chaotic swings between deep freeze and brief warmth are over. The planet settles into a gentle, predictable pattern of seasons. This stability is the crucial ingredient, the fertile ground in which the next, and perhaps most profound, revolution in the human story will take root. It does not happen all at once, or in one place. It is a slow, quiet revolution that begins independently in at least 7 or 8 different locations around the globe, a remarkable instance of convergent human innovation. In a hilly region of the Middle East known as the Fertile Crescent, you watch as people who have been gathering wild wheat and barley for generations begin to experiment. Instead of just taking what the wild grasses offer, they start to save the best seeds from the biggest, tastiest plants and deliberately sow them in cleared plots of land near their camps. Halfway across the world, in the river valleys of China, Other groups are doing the same with wild rice. In the highlands of New Guinea, it is taro and bananas. In Mesoamerica, it is corn, beans, and squash. At the same time, they begin to manage the wild animals they hunt. They start by selectively culling the most aggressive animals from a herd of wild goats or sheep, and over generations of careful breeding, they transform these wild creatures into tamer, more manageable, domesticated livestock. This is the Neolithic Revolution. This is the birth of agriculture. Humanity is making a fundamental shift in its relationship with the world, moving from a passive harvester of nature's bounty to an active manager and cultivator of it. We are no longer just chasing our food, we are learning to grow it. This new strategy, for all its promise, comes with a hidden cost. It is a trap. A hunter-gatherer band can pack up and move when resources are scarce, but a farmer is tied to the land. You must stay by your fields to tend them, to water them, to weed them, and to guard them from animals and from other people. The nomadic lifestyle that has defined humanity for its entire existence is over. You watch as the first permanent villages begin to appear. Settlements of mud brick houses, like Jericho or Çatalhöyük, where people live year-round for the first time. The wandering hunter has become a settled villager. This new sedentary life has explosive and unforeseen consequences. For the first time, it is possible to create a true food surplus. Farmers can grow more food than their immediate family needs to eat. This surplus is the seed of civilization, but it is also the root of all our modern problems. On the one hand, a surplus can support a much larger population and allows for a specialization of labor. If there is extra grain, not everyone has to be a farmer. Someone can specialize in making better pots to store the grain. Someone else can specialize in weaving cloth. Another can become a priest, tasked with praying to the gods for a good harvest. And another can become a soldier, paid in grain to defend the village's surplus from raiders. But the surplus also creates new anxieties. Who owns the surplus? How is it divided? This leads directly to the concepts of private property, of wealth, and of inequality. The egalitarianism of the hunter-gatherer band is replaced by a new social hierarchy. A few powerful individuals, a chief, a king, a priesthood, come to control the surplus, and with it, the labor of the majority. The life of an early farmer was, in many ways, much harder and less healthy than that of their hunter-gatherer ancestors. Their workday was longer, their labor more back-breaking, and their diet far less varied, often based on a single starchy crop, leading to malnutrition and disease. Historians and archaeologists still argue passionately whether the agricultural revolution was the great leap forward that enabled civilization, or, as some have controversially called it, history's biggest fraud, a trap that locked us into a life of hard labor and social strife. Whichever it was, the die was cast. With agriculture, humanity was no longer just another species living within the ecosystem. We had become a force that actively reshapes the ecosystem to suit its own needs. We cleared forests for fields, diverted rivers for irrigation, and chose which plants and animals would thrive and which would be driven away. This new power over nature, this new way of controlling our own food supply, would set the stage for the next great explosion in human social organization. The rise of cities and the birth of civilization. The food surplus, that revolutionary prize won through the hard labor of the first farmers, has become the engine of a new and radical human experiment. The small, mud-brick villages that dotted the fertile river valleys of the world are beginning to swell. You watch as they grow, becoming denser, more crowded, and more complex, until they cross an invisible threshold and become something the world has never seen before. A city. You are walking through the bustling, unpaved streets of a city like Uruk in ancient Mesopotamia. The air is thick with the dust kicked up by 1,000 passing feet, the smell of baking bread, the bleating of livestock being herded to market, and the constant low hum of human enterprise. This is a world built on specialization. For the first time in history, a significant portion of the population does not have to spend their days hunting or farming. The grain surplus, controlled and redistributed from a central storehouse, buys their time and their talent. You see a potter, his hands covered in wet clay, skillfully shaping a storage jar on a primitive wheel. You pass the workshop of a weaver, transforming flax into linen cloth. You see stonemasons, carpenters, and metallurgists, the first artisans and engineers, their skills honed by a lifetime of dedicated practice. You see a class of priests who mediate between the people and the gods that control the rains and the harvest. And you see soldiers, their spears and shields marking them as the enforcers of the city's ruler, the guarantors of order within the walls, and protection from the chaos without. Society is no longer a flat, egalitarian band. It is a complex, hierarchical pyramid. But this new complexity creates a new and pressing problem: a crisis of information. How does the king's administrator keep track of the thousands of bushels of grain coming into the city's granary as taxes? How does a merchant record a complex trade deal involving 10 sheep, 3 bolts of cloth, and a shipment of cedar wood from a distant land? The human memory, which had been sufficient to store the knowledge of a hunter-gatherer band, is no longer capable of managing the sheer data of a city. A new technology is needed, a way to store information outside of the fallible human brain. In a dusty administrative building, you see the solution in its most primitive form. A scribe is pressing small, shaped clay tokens, one shape for a sheep, another for a measure of grain, into a wet clay tablet, then baking it in the sun. It is a simple ledger, a piece of accounting. This is the humble birth of writing. It was not invented for poetry or for philosophy, but for bureaucracy. It was glorified bean counting. Over centuries, these simple tokens pressed into clay evolve into more abstract, wedge-shaped marks made with a reed stylus. This is cuneiform, the world's first true system of writing, and it is a revolution on par with the control of fire. For the first time, knowledge can be recorded with perfect fidelity and transmitted unchanged across vast distances and down through the generations. History is no longer a game of telephone played with oral traditions. It can now be written down. With the power to organize thousands of people through social hierarchy, and the power to manage vast resources through writing, the scale of human endeavor explodes. The city-state grows into the kingdom, and the kingdom into the First Empire. You travel to the banks of the Nile and witness the ultimate expression of this new organizational power. You watch as tens of thousands of laborers, not slaves but farmers conscripted during the annual flood, work in perfect coordination to build a literal mountain of stone. They are constructing the pyramids of Giza. These are not just tombs. They are a testament to the power of a centralized state to command and focus the energy of an entire society on a single monumental task. It is an achievement that would be utterly impossible for a collection of small villages or a band of hunter-gatherers. Similar experiments in large-scale civilization are igniting across the globe, in the Indus Valley, in China, and later in the Americas. As these civilizations grow in wealth and security, some people are afforded the time for a new kind of speculation. With survival no longer a minute-to-minute concern for everyone, a few minds are freed to ask bigger, more abstract questions. Who are we? Why are we here? What is a good life? What is the nature of the universe? In a remarkable period around the first millennium BCE, known as the Axial Age, the great spiritual and philosophical traditions that still shape the inner world of billions of people are born. In India, the Buddha and the sages of the Upanishads explore the nature of consciousness. In China, Confucius and Laozi lay out blueprints for a just society and a harmonious life. In the Middle East, the prophets of Israel articulate a radical new idea of a single, universal God. And in the bustling city-states of Greece, the first true philosophers, like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, invent a new way of thinking based on logic and rational inquiry. These great civilizations, once isolated islands of humanity, are now beginning to connect. You watch as a long caravan of camels, laden with shimmering bales of silk from China, makes its slow and arduous journey across the deserts of Central Asia. This is the Silk Road, the world's first great global network. But it carries far more than silk and spices. It is a conduit for ideas, technologies, and religions. Buddhism travels from India to transform China. The invention of paper in China makes its way west. But these networks carry dangers as well. They are also highways for deadly new diseases, like the plagues that would periodically ravage the great cities of Rome and China. The world is becoming smaller, more interconnected, and the pace of history, which had been moving at a crawl for millions of years, is now accelerating into a frantic, chaotic, and unpredictable sprint. The frantic sprint of history, driven by empires and philosophies, is about to accelerate into a disorienting, world-breaking blur. The interconnected world of trade and ideas has created a new kind of ecosystem, one where a good idea can spread like wildfire and spark a revolution. And in the cool, damp cities of the 17th and 18th century Europe, a new and dangerous idea is taking hold. It is a new way of thinking, a new way of questioning the world that we call the scientific revolution. For millennia, ultimate truth had been the province of ancient texts and divine revelation. Now, a new and radical authority is proposed. The authority of direct observation, of repeatable experimentation, and of the cold, universal language of mathematics. This is not just a philosophical shift. It is a profound change in the human toolkit. You watch as a new breed of thinker, the natural philosopher, turns their gaze from the heavens to the mechanics of the world itself. They are no longer content to simply ask why. They are obsessed with asking how. How does a planet move in its orbit? How does light bend through a prism? How does pressure work in a gas? And most consequentially of all, how can the hidden forces of nature be harnessed and put to work? For the entire span of human history, from the first stone tool to the building of the great cathedrals, the limit of human power has been a simple and brutal equation. All work was ultimately powered by the contraction of muscles, both human and animal, or by the unreliable and diffuse power of the wind in a sail or the water in a stream. This was the great bottleneck of civilization. But in the smoky, coal-dusted workshops of England, an answer to this ancient problem is slowly taking shape. hissing and clanking its way into existence. In 1712, a humble ironmonger named Thomas Newcomen develops a crude but effective engine that uses steam to pump water out of flooded coal mines. It is a niche, inefficient, and monstrously large machine. But it is a start. Then, in the later part of the century, a Scottish instrument maker named James Watt makes a series of brilliant improvements, creating a far more efficient and versatile steam engine. This is the moment the bottleneck is broken. Humanity has finally learned to harness a new source of power, one that is not dependent on muscle or the weather. It has learned how to turn heat into useful work. And what is the source of this heat? It is coal. And what is coal? You must cast your mind back across an almost unimaginable gulf of time, to the humid, alien swamp forests of the Carboniferous period. You must remember those giant club mosses and towering tree ferns, capturing the energy of the ancient sun through photosynthesis. For 35 million years, they captured that sunlight, and when they died, their bodies were buried, their captured solar energy locked away with them deep underground. Now, hundreds of millions of years later, their ghosts are being resurrected. The Industrial Revolution is powered by unleashing this vast subterranean reservoir of ancient sunlight. Every chugging locomotive, every clattering factory loom is running on the fossilized remains of a world that existed long before the first dinosaur ever walked the Earth. This new power unleashes a wave of change that utterly transforms the planet and the human species. You watch as factories, belching thick columns of black smoke, spring up like mushrooms around the cities of Europe and America. Railroads, those iron arteries of the New Age, spread across continents, shrinking distances that had been unchanged for millennia. Great steamships of iron and steel replace the wooden sailing vessels of old, making the oceans reliable highways for trade and empire. Millions of people, whose families had worked the same patch of land for 1,000 years, now flood into the rapidly growing, crowded and often squalid cities. To work in the new factories, the very fabric of society is rewoven. For the first time, a significant portion of humanity is no longer directly involved in the growing of food. We have become an urban species. And in the last 200 years, a span of time so short on our 3-hour journey that it barely registers as a single tick of the clock, this new industrial power has fueled a phenomenon known as the Great Acceleration. You can see it in a series of terrifying exponential graphs. Human population, which took 300,000 years to reach 1 billion, suddenly rockets past 7 billion. The consumption of resources, the production of goods, the use of energy, all of it explodes in a near vertical climb. This explosive growth leads to a new and sobering realization. Geologists have a name for this proposed new epoch we have created: the Anthropocene, the Age of Humans. The idea, first popularized by the Nobel Prize-winning chemist Paul Crutzen, is that human activity has become the dominant geological force shaping the planet. When future geologists, millions of years from now, examine the rock layers of our time, our presence will be unmistakable. They will find a thin global layer of artificial radionuclides, the fallout from the nuclear bomb tests of the mid-20th century. They will find the fossilized remains of our plastic waste, a material that will likely persist for geological timescales. And they will see it in the chemistry of the air itself, preserved in the tiny bubbles trapped in the ice cores of Antarctica, which provide clear scientific evidence of a sudden vertical spike in atmospheric carbon dioxide, the direct result of our burning of that ancient, buried sunlight. Historians still argue whether this new age represents humanity's greatest triumph or its most dangerous folly. But what is clear is that we have, for the first time, become a power on par with the great natural forces of the Earth. We can now move more rock and soil than all the world's rivers combined. We are fixing more nitrogen from the atmosphere than all of the planet's natural processes. This unprecedented power brings with it an unprecedented and often terrifying responsibility. We are no longer just passengers on Spaceship Earth. We have, consciously or not, seized the controls. The age of steam and steel, which seemed so revolutionary, was just the prelude. The final disorienting chapter of our story is not written in iron, but in lightning. In the 20th century, humanity masters a new and invisible force, electromagnetism. We learn to tame it, to send it humming through copper wires, to turn night into day with the flick of a switch. We learn to cast our voices and our images through the air on invisible waves, creating the age of radio and television. And then, we teach the lightning how to think. The invention of the electronic computer, first a room-sized behemoth of vacuum tubes and relays, and then a tiny sliver of silicon that can fit in your hand, marks a phase change in human culture. And in the latter half of the century, a quiet project funded by the military, called the ARPANET, connects a handful of these thinking machines together. It is the humble, unnoticed birth of the Internet. You are living in the world born of that final invention. An age of instant global communication, where you can speak to someone on the other side of the planet as easily as you can speak to someone in the next room. It is an age where artificial intelligence is beginning to write our music and dream our dreams. An age where we are learning to read and to rewrite the ancient code of life itself, the DNA that has been passed down, unbroken, for nearly 4 billion years. This is the modern world, the dizzying pinnacle of our journey. And now, for the final, mind-bending perspective, let's look at the clock. On our 3-hour journey through deep time, the entire span of recorded human history, from the first cuneiform tablets in Sumeria to the words you are hearing right now, flashes by in the final 2 seconds. The great pyramids of Giza, those enduring symbols of ancient power, are built and eroded in less than 2/10 of a single second. The entire Roman Empire rises and falls in a blink. The Industrial Revolution, the age of steam and steel that remade the very surface of the planet, is a frantic buzz of a few milliseconds. The development of the Internet, the entire digital age that defines your life, happens in the final, fading, infinitesimal moment before the clock strikes the end. And so the clock runs out. The 3 hours are over. And in that time, you have witnessed the entire, improbable, and breathtaking story of our world. You watched as it was born from a cloud of stardust and forged in a crucible of cosmic violence. You drifted in the hot green ocean of a world without oxygen and saw the first simple cell flicker into existence. You witnessed life poison its own cradle with the invention of photosynthesis, and then survive a planet frozen solid from pole to pole. You saw the brutal, clanking battlefield of the Cambrian Explosion, the rise of the first fish, the quiet green conquest of the land, and the alien swampy forests of the Carboniferous that would one day power our world. You saw the reign of the great synapsids, our own distant kin, and watched as they were almost erased from existence in the unimaginable horror of the great dying. You saw the dawn of the dinosaurs, their glorious 150 million year reign across the lush jungles of the Jurassic and the flower-decked plains of the Cretaceous. You felt the chill of the day a rock fell from the sky, and you scurried in the shadows with our small mammalian ancestors as they inherited a world of ghosts. You watched them take to the trees, and then be forced back down onto the savanna, where they took that first crucial upright step. And you followed our own lineage, a fragile branch of apes, as they learned to think, to dream, to create, and to become the last human species on a lonely planet. You are the unlikely endpoint of that entire 4.5 billion year saga. The iron in your blood was forged in the heart of a dying star before the Earth even existed. The oxygen you are breathing at this very moment was a gift from the ancient cyanobacteria that rusted a world. Every single strand of DNA in every one of your cells is a direct, unbroken line of inheritance, a sacred text copied and passed down from that first miraculous cell that sparked into being in the deep, dark ocean. We are the first species on this planet to become aware of this story, the first to be able to look back and understand the immense, beautiful, and terrifying journey that led to this moment. We are the planet's consciousness, and we are the first species to hold the future of the entire biosphere in our hands. The next chapter is not yet written. The clock has reset. What will we do with the time we have? And now, as our long journey through time comes to its end, let that immense story gently fade. There is no need to hold on to all of it. Just let the echoes remain. The quiet rustle of a Carboniferous fern, the distant roar of a Tyrannosaurus, the soft footfall of an ancestor on the savanna dust. Let the vastness of it all become a soft, deep blanket of perspective. All of that chaos, all of that struggle, all of that time has led to the quiet safety of this very moment, in this room, in this bed. The Earth continues its slow and steady spin, just as it has for billions of nights before this one. The moon, that ancient companion born of fire, is still pulling at the tides. The great slow dance of geology and biology continues, indifferent to our brief and noisy lives. Feel the weight of that deep history not as a burden, but as a foundation, the solid ground of existence on which you can now safely rest. Let the questions of tomorrow dissolve into the silence of tonight. There is nothing left to do now but to close your eyes, to breathe, and to drift into the quiet, timeless space of your own dreams.